I always thought I was good with numbers. As an accountant, it's kind of my thing. But staring at my bank statement that morning, something wasn't adding up. A $5,000 withdrawal I definitely hadn't made was staring back at me, mocking my carefully maintained spreadsheets and budgets. My name is Claire, and until that moment, I thought I had my life pretty well organized. Sure, living with my in-laws wasn't ideal, but Jake and I had agreed it would only be for a few months while they got back on their feet. That was 8 months ago. I double-checked the transaction details on my phone, my hands shaking slightly. The withdrawal had been made in person at our local branch yesterday afternoon, while I was stuck in a 4-hour budget meeting at work. Jake? I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. No response. Of course not. He'd already left for work, probably passing his mother in the kitchen on his way out. Evelyn practically lived at our kitchen table these days, planning her social events and making endless phone calls. As if on cue, I heard her voice floating up the stairs. Claire, darling, could you bring me my reading glasses when you come down? I think I left them in the guest room. The guest room. Right. What used to be my home office before they moved in. I took a deep breath, grabbed her glasses, and headed downstairs, the bank statement crumpled in my other hand. There you are. Evelyn beamed at me, perfectly coiffed despite the early hour. I was just telling Richard about the most wonderful investment opportunity. You know how these things are, you have to act quickly when good fortune comes knocking. I froze halfway through handing her the glasses. Richard, my father-in-law, suddenly seemed very interested in his coffee cup. Investment opportunity? I repeated slowly, the crumpled paper in my hand suddenly feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Oh yes, dear. Jake mentioned you were both doing so well financially, and since we're family. She waved her hand dismissively. Don't worry your pretty head about it. Jake handled everything yesterday. The room started spinning slightly. Jake had given his parents access to our joint account, the one where I deposited my entire salary every month. The one we'd been using to save for our own house. Without even asking me. I need to make a phone call, I managed to say, turning around before Evelyn could see my face. As I climbed the stairs, I could hear her chattering away to Richard about some charity gala she was planning to host. In my house, no doubt. My hands weren't shaking anymore as I reached for my phone. They were perfectly steady as I dialed Jake's number, a strange calm settling over me. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was war. Jake never picked up his phone that morning. Instead, I got a text around noon. Sorry, honey, crazy day at work. We'll talk tonight. I was sitting in my car outside my favorite coffee shop where I'd agreed to meet Mia for lunch. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. 8 unanswered calls, and all I got was a text. You look like you're about to commit murder, Mia said, tapping on my window. Come on, I got us a table in the back. Inside, over steaming cups of coffee, I told her everything. The mysterious withdrawal, Evelyn's casual mention of an investment opportunity, Jake's silence. Mia's expression darkened with each detail. So let me get this straight, she said, setting down her cup with a sharp click. Your mother-in-law is redecorating your guest bathroom with gold fixtures while using your money? I blinked. What? You haven't seen the delivery guys? They were at your house this morning when I drove by. I thought you knew. There was this huge truck from Luxury Bath and Beyond parked in your driveway. My coffee suddenly tasted like acid. $5,000. On bathroom fixtures. In my house. Without even asking. Claire, Mia leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. This isn't just about money anymore. They're literally renovating your house without your permission. I know, I whispered. But Jake needs to grow a spine, she cut in. Or you need to grow claws. My phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn. Darling, the contractors need a decision about the marble countertops. I picked out a lovely Italian import, but it's slightly over budget. Jake said to check with you since you're so good with numbers. Mia read the message over my shoulder and let out a low whistle. Slightly over budget? You mean over the budget of your stolen money? I started typing a response, then stopped. Deleted. Started again. How do you tell someone they've crossed a line when they don't even acknowledge the existence of boundaries? You know what the worst part is? I said, putting my phone away. Last week, Evelyn told me I should be grateful they moved in. Said Jake was finally becoming the man she raised him to be now that they're around more. And what kind of man is that? Mia asked. One who apparently doesn't need to consult his wife about anything. I stood up, suddenly feeling restless. I need to get back to work. But first, I'm stopping by the bank to open a new account. One without Jake's name on it. Mia smiled. Now that's the Claire I know. Just remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting free. As I drove back to work, I couldn't stop thinking about those words. Getting free. Maybe it was time to show the Addisons exactly what kind of woman their son had married. The truth hit me like a slap in the face when I was organizing our tax documents. Jake hadn't just given his parents access to our joint account, he'd been systematically transferring money to them for months. Small amounts at first, then larger sums, all carefully labeled as business expenses or household maintenance. I was still staring at the spreadsheet when Jake came home that evening. The house smelled of his mother's signature pot roast, and I could hear her laughing with Richard in the dining room. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching my life through someone else's eyes. Hey, you missed dinner, Jake said, loosening his tie. Mom saved you a plate. $27,000, I interrupted, my voice surprisingly steady. That's how much you've given them since January. The color drained from his face. Claire, I can explain. Please do. I turned the laptop toward him. Explain why you've been lying to me for months. Explain why your parents are renovating our bathroom while we can barely afford our mortgage payments. They needed help, he said, running his hands through his hair. Dad's investments went bad and Mom. And what about us? My voice cracked. What about our plans? The house we were saving for. They're my parents, Claire. And I'm your wife. The words exploded out of me. Or am I just your personal ATM? Heavy footsteps in the hallway made us both freeze. Richard appeared in the doorway, Evelyn hovering behind him. Is everything all right? Richard asked, though his eyes were fixed on Jake. Son, perhaps we should discuss. There's nothing to discuss, I cut in, standing up. This is between me and my husband. Evelyn stepped forward, her perfectly manicured hands clasped together. Claire, darling, you're being dramatic. Family helps family. Surely you understand. Family doesn't steal, I said. Family doesn't lie. We never stole anything, she replied, her voice sharp. Jake offered to help. He knows his responsibilities to this family. This family? I laughed, the sound hollow. You mean the family that's been bleeding us dry while planning charity galas in my house? Jake reached for my arm. Claire, please. I jerked away from him, suddenly seeing everything with crystal clarity. The way they'd slowly taken over our home, our finances, our lives. The way Jake had let them. I'm staying at Mia's tonight, I said, grabbing my keys. And when I come back, I expect some real answers about where my money went. All of it. As I walked out, I heard Evelyn's voice. Jake, sweetheart, you can't let her speak to us this way. We're your parents. I slammed the door behind me, my hands steady as I started the car. For the first time in months, I knew exactly what I needed to do. Mia's guest room became my sanctuary for 3 days. Jake called constantly, but I let his messages pile up, each one more desperate than the last. It wasn't until I checked our online banking that I finally broke my silence. He's still transferring money, I told Mia, my laptop screen glowing in her dim kitchen. Even after everything, he just moved another $2,000 to their account yesterday. Mia set down her wine glass. Have you talked to a lawyer yet? The word lawyer made my stomach clench. I keep thinking about our wedding day. Jake promised to always put us first. Now I wonder if he even remembers making that promise. My phone buzzed, another text from Jake. Please come home. We need to talk about this like adults. Like adults. Mia read over my shoulder, snorting. You mean like how he's been acting like a teenager with his mom's credit card? I started typing a response when an email notification popped up. From our mortgage company. My hands started shaking as I opened it. Oh God, I whispered. We're 3 months behind on our mortgage payments. Mia leaned in closer. But you've been making the payments every month. I have. My voice sounded strange, distant. But apparently Jake's been canceling them and redirecting the money. There's a notice of default. A knock at Mia's front door made us both jump. Through the window, I saw Jake's car parked outside. I'll get rid of him. Mia started to stand, but I stopped her. No, I said, suddenly calm. I need to handle this. Jake looked terrible when I opened the door, unshaven, shirt wrinkled. Claire, please. Mom's beside herself. Dad's talking about moving out. The mortgage, Jake? My voice was barely a whisper. You've been stealing our mortgage payments? He flinched. Dad's investment group is about to turn things around. Once they secure this next deal. There is no deal, is there? The realization hit me like a wave. Your father's broke, and you're destroying our life to maintain their lifestyle. Their family, he pleaded. We can't just abandon them. But you can abandon our future? I stepped back inside. I'm filing for separation, Jake. I suggest you talk to your parents about finding somewhere else to live. Claire, wait. I closed the door, my heart pounding but my mind clear. Through the window, I watched him stand there for a long moment before finally walking away. You okay? Mia asked softly. I nodded, pulling out my phone to search for divorce lawyers. I will be. For the first time in months, I actually will be. After a week at Mia's, I returned home with divorce papers and a plan. What I didn't expect was to find Evelyn hosting a garden party in my backyard, complete with catering staff and string lights strung through my apple trees. Claire. She waved as if nothing had happened. You're just in time. The caterers need approval for the menu for next weekend's charity gala. I stood frozen on my own back porch, watching strangers arrange flowers on tables I'd never seen before. What charity gala? The one we're hosting here, of course. Evelyn adjusted a centerpiece. Jake said you'd be fine with it. We've already sent out the invitations. The divorce papers felt heavy in my bag. Where's Jake? Working late again, poor dear. He's been so stressed lately. She lowered her voice. Though I suppose that's partly your fault, running off like a teenager having a tantrum. Something inside me snapped. Everyone needs to leave. Now, don't be ridiculous. Get out. My voice carried across the yard, making the catering staff pause. All of you. This event is canceled. Evelyn's face hardened. I have 50 guests coming next weekend. Important people. You can't just. Watch me. I pulled out my phone and dialed the catering company's number from their truck side panel. Hi, I'm Claire Addison, the homeowner. I'm canceling all services for next weekend's event. No, Mrs. Evelyn Addison is not authorized to make arrangements for my property. Claire. Richard appeared from inside, his face red. You're embarrassing your mother. She's not my mother. I turned to the stunned staff. Please pack up and leave. Now. As they hurriedly gathered their things, Evelyn grabbed my arm. You ungrateful little. Let go, I said quietly, or I'll call the police and have you removed for trespassing. She released me like I'd burned her. Jake will hear about this. Good. I pulled the divorce papers from my bag. He can add it to the list of things we need to discuss. Richard stepped forward, finally looking uncertain. Now, Claire, let's not be hasty. You have until tomorrow to find somewhere else to stay. I walked into my house, and started up the stairs. I suggest you start packing. This isn't over. Evelyn called after me. You're right, I said, not turning around. It's just beginning. In my bedroom, I could hear them arguing downstairs, could hear the catering trucks pulling away. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt powerful. My phone buzzed, Jake calling again. This time, I answered. We need to talk, I said before he could speak. And this time, I'm doing the talking. Jake came home late that night, but he wasn't alone. The entire Addison family clan filled my dining room, aunts, uncles, cousins I'd never met. Evelyn sat at the head of my table like a queen holding court. Claire, Jake said, his voice strained. Mom thought we should have a family meeting. Family meeting? I looked around at the strangers in my house. Or an intervention? Evelyn smiled, that practiced, perfect smile that never reached her eyes. We're all concerned about your recent behavior, dear. The canceled charity gala, the threats, the divorce papers, which you had no right to tell anyone about, I cut in, looking at Jake. His cousin Sarah, whom I'd never met, reached for my hand. We just want to help. Family stays together. I pulled away. You don't even know me. But we know Jake, Richard said. And this isn't like him. The missed payments, the stress, it all started when you began pushing back against family obligations. My laugh sounded hollow even to my own ears. Family obligations? Is that what we're calling financial abuse now? Nobody's abusing anyone, Jake insisted. Mom and Dad needed help. So you stole from our mortgage payments? The room went quiet. Did you tell them that part, Jake? Did you tell your whole family how you've been secretly funneling money to your parents while our house is about to go into foreclosure? Evelyn's smile faltered. Jake assured us you were both doing very well financially. We were, I said. Until you moved in. Now, Claire, Richard started, but I'd had enough. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. Would everyone like to see exactly how well we're doing? Here's our mortgage statement. Here's Jake's secret transfers. Here's the credit card debt he's been hiding. That's enough. Jake slammed his hand on the table. No, it's not enough. I turned to the shocked faces around the table. You all want to talk about family? Fine. Let's talk about how your perfect Jake and his wonderful parents have nearly bankrupted us. Let's talk about. The slap caught me off guard. Evelyn stood there, hand still raised, her face twisted with rage. You ungrateful little witch. After everything we've done for you. The room erupted in chaos. Jake's relatives started talking all at once, some defending Evelyn, others looking horrified. Through the noise, I locked eyes with Jake, waiting for him to say something, do something. He looked away. Get out, I whispered, then louder. All of you, get out. Claire, Jake reached for me. Don't. I stepped back, my cheek still stinging. Just don't. As I walked upstairs, I could hear Evelyn organizing the family, making plans, taking control. Again. But this time, something was different. This time, I was done playing nice. I spent the night gathering documents, bank statements, mortgage papers, credit card bills. By morning, I had a clear picture of exactly how much damage the Addisons had done. When Jake finally came to our bedroom, I was ready. We need to talk, he said, hovering in the doorway. About how you've been lying to everyone? I spread the papers across our bed. Your parents aren't just broke, are they? They're in debt. Serious debt. His face crumpled. Claire, please. How bad is it, Jake? Because these credit card statements show you've been paying for everything. Their cars, their vacations, even their country club membership. They'll pay it back, he insisted. Dad's investment. There is no investment. I threw a handful of bounce check notices at him. Your father's been writing bad checks for months. And you've been covering for him by draining our accounts. Jake slumped against the wall. You don't understand. Mom and Dad gave me everything growing up. I owe them. You owe me. My voice cracked. I'm your wife. We built this life together, and you threw it all away for what? To maintain your mother's delusions. Their family. And what am I? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Downstairs, I could hear Evelyn's voice, probably planning another party we couldn't afford. I can't choose, Jake whispered. You already did. I pulled out one final document, my separate bank account statement. I've moved my salary to a new account. I'm not funding their fantasy life anymore. You can't do that. Watch me. I stood up, suddenly feeling lighter. I've also called a realtor. The house goes on the market next week. Mom will never. Your mother has no say in this. Neither do you anymore. I handed him the divorce papers. I've already signed my part. Jake stared at the papers, his hands shaking. If you do this, if you make me choose. I'm not making you choose, Jake. I'm choosing myself. A commotion downstairs made us both turn. Evelyn appeared in the doorway, her face red with anger. What's this about selling the house? She demanded. Jake, tell her she can't. The house is in my name, I cut in. I bought it before we were married. You all seem to have forgotten that. But we're family. Evelyn's voice rose hysterically. No, I said quietly. We're not. We never were. I walked past them both, down the stairs, and out the front door. Behind me, I could hear Evelyn's shrill voice, Jake's protests, but they sounded distant, unimportant. In my car, I took a deep breath and started the engine. It wasn't the revenge I'd originally wanted, but something better, freedom. 6 months later, I stood in my newly renovated kitchen, admiring the simple white cabinets that had replaced Evelyn's gaudy gold fixtures. The house had sold quickly, and my new townhouse felt like a fresh start. No more echoing rooms filled with other people's expectations. My phone buzzed, a text from Jake's cousin Sarah. You should know, Mom and Dad finally moved in with Evelyn and Richard. Jake's living in their pool house. I smiled, imagining Evelyn's perfect world crumbling under the weight of reality. For adults living off Jake's salary, pretending everything was fine. Karma had its own way of settling scores. The doorbell rang. I opened it to find Evelyn standing there, looking smaller somehow. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by department store basics. "Claire," she said softly. "May I come in?" Part of me wanted to slam the door, but curiosity won out. I stepped aside. "Nice place," she said, glancing around. "Very. You." "What do you want, Evelyn?" She twisted her hands together, a nervous gesture I'd never seen before. "Jake's getting counseling. For financial codependency. He wanted me to give you this." She handed me an envelope. Inside was a check, not for everything they'd taken, but a start. It was supposed to be perfect, Evelyn whispered. My perfect son, his perfect life. I thought if I could just control everything. She trailed off, looking lost. "That's the problem," I said. "You can't control everything. Or everyone." "I know that now." She reached for her purse. "I should go." At the door, she turned back. "I'm sorry, Claire. Not just for the money. For everything." I nodded, not quite ready to forgive, but understanding something I hadn't before. Evelyn's perfect world had been built on fear of losing control, losing status, losing her son's devotion. After she left, I sat in my quiet kitchen, looking at the check. 6 months ago, I'd wanted revenge, wanted to make them all hurt like I had. Now, watching their carefully constructed facade crumble under its own weight felt less like victory and more like liberation. My phone buzzed again. "Mia, drinks tonight? That cute bartender's asking about you again." I smiled, thinking about new beginnings and unexpected paths. The check in my hand represented more than money. It was acknowledgement, accountability, maybe even a hint of redemption. But I didn't need it anymore. I took a photo of the check and sent it to Jake with a simple message. "Use this for your therapy. I'm good on my own." Then I texted Mia back. "Tell the bartender I'll be there at 8. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting free. My name is Emma, and I'm 30 years old. I work for a manufacturing company in Chicago, a job I landed after graduating from a prestigious university. I'm proud of my achievements and the financial stability I've built, but what's the point of economic success if a constant, heavy strain on your personal life accompanies it? That's my story. My story is about how I found myself supporting not just myself, but also my husband, Jake. At 33, he still hadn't managed to hold down a stable job. Jake and I have been married for nearly 5 years. We met in college, and while we shared many dreams and ambitions, life hasn't turned out as smoothly as we had hoped. Jake had a promising start with a stable job after graduation, but things took a turn for the worse when he had a conflict with his boss. The clash wasn't entirely Jake's fault. The boss was notorious for being difficult. Still, Jake's decision to quit was a blow to our finances and his confidence. Since then, finding and keeping a job has been a struggle for him. For the past year, Jake has been job hunting without success. He's tried various part-time jobs, but he's quick to quit whenever something doesn't meet his expectations or if he faces a minor conflict. It's as though he's searching for an escape rather than a solution. I've tried to be supportive, understanding that his past experiences might be affecting his job search, but it's wearing me thin. His unemployment isn't just a financial burden, it's a strain on our marriage. The turning point came unexpectedly last month. Jake came to me with excitement in his eyes. "Emma, I've got big news," he said, his tone brimming with enthusiasm. "What's up?" I asked, hoping for something positive. "Well, my parents are celebrating Dad's retirement, and I've decided to take them on a trip to Italy to celebrate. I'm going to use the Freedom credit card," Jake said, mentioning the card I use for work and personal expenses. I was taken aback. "The Freedom credit card, Jake? That's not a small expense. Have you discussed this with me?" "No need to worry, it's all sorted. I've already planned the trip and booked the flights," he replied nonchalantly. My heart sank. "Jake, we've talked about our finances. You can't just use the credit card without discussing it first and considering our current situation. This doesn't seem wise." Jake brushed off my concerns. "It's going to be a great trip. I've got it covered." Days later, I received an alarming call from the credit card company. "Hello, Mrs. Harris. We noticed some unusual activity on your Freedom credit card. It seems there's been an attempt to use it for a transaction that's been declined." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean? What transaction?" The representative explained that the card had been blocked due to suspicious activity and would soon be replaced with a new one. I realized the card Jake used was no longer valid. When Jake came home that evening, I confronted him. "Jake, I need to talk to you about the credit card. It's been blocked." Jake's face went pale. "What? That can't be right. I've already told my parents we're going on this trip. How am I supposed to pay for it?" "Exactly. My point is that you used my credit card without permission, and now it doesn't work. What's your plan now?" I asked, trying to keep my frustration in check. Jake looked increasingly anxious. "I don't know. I thought it would work." "That's not the issue, Jake. You've repeatedly made decisions without considering the consequences. This is just another example of how your lack of responsibility is affecting us." The next day, I received a call from Olivia, Jake's mother. "Emma, I'm so sorry about Jake's actions. He told us about the trip, but we had no idea he used your credit card without asking." "It's more than just using the credit card, Olivia," I said, feeling the weight of frustration. "Jake has been struggling with employment and making poor financial decisions. This trip was just the tipping point." Olivia sounded genuinely concerned. "We're worried about him too. We thought this trip would be a good distraction, but it seems it's caused more problems. I'll talk with him." As I hung up the phone, I realized that this situation wasn't just about the trip or the credit card. It was about the larger pattern of Jake's behavior. He's been avoiding responsibility for so long that it's now affecting every aspect of our lives. Later that evening, Jake came to me with a pained expression. "I know you're upset, Emma. I should have talked to you first. I just wanted to do something nice for my parents, and I thought it would be a good way to celebrate." "I understand wanting to do something special for your parents," I said, "but the way you handled it was irresponsible. We need to address this issue, not just the trip, but the underlying problem. You've been avoiding your responsibilities for too long." Jake looked at me with pleading eyes. "What are you saying, Emma?" I took a deep breath. "Jake, I think we need to talk about our future. This pattern of behavior is not sustainable. We need to find a solution before it's too late." As I spoke, I felt a sense of dread. The weight of our issues felt heavier than ever. I knew this conversation would be a turning point, but I wasn't sure how it would end. All I knew was that we were at a critical juncture in our marriage, and something had to change. After that conversation with Jake, things felt more strained than ever. It was clear that the issues between us were deeper than just a financial misstep. The trip to Italy was merely a symptom of a much larger problem: Jake's persistent irresponsibility and my growing frustration with it. Over the next few days, Jake's demeanor was subdued, and he avoided talking about the trip. I tried to keep things as normal as possible, but the tension in our home was palpable. I focused on work, hoping that immersing myself in my responsibilities would provide some relief from the stress at home, but every day the weight of Jake's behavior felt heavier. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Jake walked in, looking more anxious than usual. "Emma, we need to talk," he said, his voice shaky. I put down the spatula and nodded. "All right, what's on your mind?" "I've been thinking about what you said," Jake began, shifting nervously from one foot to the other. Maybe I should look into getting some financial counseling or career advice. I know I haven't been handling things well. I could see the effort he was making, and part of me wanted to believe that he was finally taking responsibility. That's a start, Jake, but it's not just about seeking help. It's about changing your approach and making a commitment to it. I know, he said, sounding more honest. I've also decided to cancel the trip to Italy. I spoke to my parents, and they understand the situation. I'll figure out another way to make it up to them. While I was relieved that he canceled the trip, a nagging concern remained. Jake's tendency to make promises without following through was troubling. I needed more than words. I needed to see real change. A few days later, I got a call from Olivia, Jake's mother. "Emma, I just wanted to check in and see how things are going. I heard Jake canceled the trip, and I wanted to offer my support." "Thank you, Olivia," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's been a rough few days. I'm glad Jake decided to cancel the trip, but the issues between us go beyond that. We need to address the bigger picture." "I understand," Olivia said sympathetically. "Jake has always struggled with responsibility. I'm afraid his father and I have tried to help, but it seems like he's got to find his way." Our conversation ended on a somber note, with Olivia expressing her concern, but also acknowledging that Jake needed to take more responsibility for his actions. I appreciated her support, but knew that the real work lay ahead. As the days turned into weeks, Jake's behavior showed slight improvement. He started attending job interviews and sought out career counseling as he had promised. However, old habits were hard to break. He still seemed to lack the motivation and follow-through needed to secure a stable job. One night, as we sat together in our living room, I decided to address the issue directly. "Jake, I see you're making an effort, but it feels like we're stuck in a cycle. You make promises, but then things don't change. What's going on?" Jake sighed deeply, looking away. "I know I've let you down. I'm trying, but it's hard to stay motivated when I keep facing rejection. I feel like a failure." His confession was raw and painful. I understood the emotional toll of constant rejection, but I also knew that our situation couldn't improve without real, tangible changes. "Jake, I get that it's tough, but we need more than just trying. We need a clear plan and commitment to seeing it through. I can't carry this burden alone." Jake nodded slowly, but there was a sadness in his eyes that worried me. "I'll try harder, Emma. I don't want to lose you." His words were hopeful, but my doubts remained. I needed to see consistent effort and results, not just promises. The situation felt like a fragile balance, teetering on the edge of a precipice. As the weeks continued, I found myself increasingly questioning our future. I wanted to believe in Jake's potential for change, but every failed job search and half-hearted effort made it harder to stay optimistic. The strain on our marriage was taking a toll on my well-being. One evening, as I sat alone in the quiet of our apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were reaching a breaking point. I had hoped that Jake's recent attempts would lead to real change, but the ongoing pattern of disappointment was wearing me thin. I knew that a crucial decision lay ahead. The future of our marriage depended on whether Jake could truly change or if I would have to face the reality that our relationship might be beyond repair. The weight of uncertainty was almost unbearable, but I had to confront it. I needed to find a way forward, even if it meant making the hardest decision of my life. The situation came to a head sooner than I had anticipated. Despite Jake's best efforts, things were not improving as quickly as I had hoped. The financial strain continued to weigh heavily on us, and his ongoing job struggles seemed to drain the last bit of patience I had. Then, one evening, Jake came home with an excited look on his face. "Emma, I've got great news," he announced almost breathlessly. I set down the book I was reading, bracing myself. "What's the news, Jake?" "I've decided to take my parents on a trip to Italy," he said, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. "It'll be a great way to celebrate their retirement. I've already booked everything." I stared at him, stunned. "Jake, what do you mean? We haven't talked about this, and you didn't consult me. How are we even going to afford this?" Jake's expression faltered. "I used your Freedom credit card. I thought it would be a nice surprise." My heart sank. "You used my credit card without asking me, Jake? Do Do you realize how irresponsible that is? We've been struggling with finances, and now you've committed us to an expense we can't afford. Jake's face reddened. I just wanted to do something nice for my parents. I didn't think it would be a big deal. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. It's not just about the trip, Jake. It's about your repeated lack of responsibility. We've talked about this before. You can't just make decisions like this without considering the consequences. Jake's shoulders slumped. I didn't mean to upset you. I thought I was doing something good. I shook my head, feeling a mix of frustration and sadness. The issue is not just the trip. It's the pattern of behavior that's been damaging our marriage. You make decisions without consulting me, and then I'm left to deal with the fallout. Later that evening, as I sat alone in the quiet of our living room, I felt a wave of hopelessness. I had tried to be patient and supportive, but Jake's continued irresponsibility was pushing me to the edge. The situation was becoming unbearable. The next morning, Jake's mother, Olivia, called me. Emma, I just wanted to apologize for Jake's actions. I know he shouldn't have used your credit card without asking. Thank you, Olivia, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I appreciate your concern, but this situation has been ongoing for a long time. Jake's behavior is affecting our marriage, and I'm at a breaking point. I understand, Olivia replied. We've tried to help Jake, but it seems like he's got to make these changes on his own. We're here to support you both in any way we can. The conversation left me feeling more determined than ever. Jake's actions pushed me to reconsider our future. It was clear that the pattern of irresponsibility was not something that could be easily fixed. I needed to decide our marriage, and the time had come to face that reality. That evening, I sat down with Jake. We need to talk, I began, my voice steady but firm. I've been patient, and I've tried to support you, but your actions have made it clear that we have a serious problem. We need to address this now. Jake looked at me with a mix of worry and confusion. What are you saying? I can't continue like this, I said, feeling a lump in my throat. I've reached a point where I have to consider what's best for both of us. Your repeated lack of responsibility and the strain it's putting on our marriage has reached a critical point. Jake's face fell, and I could see the realization dawning on him. He had been given countless chances, but the pattern of behavior remained unchanged. The next steps in our relationship would determine the future, but I knew that something had to give. The weight of the decision hung heavy in the air, and as I looked at Jake, I realized that the future of our marriage was now hanging in the balance. The days following our confrontation were tense and filled with uncertainty. Jake was distraught by our conversation, and the weight of what had transpired began to sink in. The night after our talk, he sat in silence, his gaze fixed on the floor. The room was heavy with unspoken words, and I knew we had reached a turning point. The next morning, Jake's mother, Olivia, called me again. Emma, I wanted to talk to you about the situation, she said, her voice tinged with concern. Jake is devastated. He's been struggling, and I think he's finally starting to realize the impact of his actions. I understand, Olivia, I replied, my voice tired but resolute. But I've reached a point where I have to think about my well-being. This isn't just about Jake anymore. It's about the life I need to lead for myself. Later that day, Jake came to me with a look of resignation. Emma, I've been thinking about what you said. I realize I've made a mess of things, and I don't want to keep dragging you down. I could see the sincerity in his eyes, but the damage was already done. Jake, I've given this a lot of thought. I need to focus on myself now. The stress and disappointment from your actions have taken a toll on me, and I can't continue living like this. Jake nodded, his face a mix of sadness and acceptance. I understand. I've been given so many chances, and I haven't taken responsibility. I guess this is what I've brought on myself. It was a painful realization, but it was the right decision for both of us. The following days were a whirlwind of legal paperwork and discussions with our families. My decision to file for divorce was final, and I hoped that this step would lead to a more stable and fulfilling life for both of us. When the divorce was finalized, a wave of relief washed over me. I felt lighter, as though a great weight had been lifted. The constant stress and uncertainty were gone, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of freedom. My life was no longer overshadowed by
My name's Anya Thompson. Tonight, like most nights since arriving in Monte Carlo, I found myself sitting alone at a small cafe on the edge of the bustling casino square. It's a far cry from the luxurious life I was born into, but after graduating from a fancy college stateside, all I wanted was a simple break. My dad, he owns half the globe it seems, from hotels to tech firms. I use my mom's last name though, to keep things real, to keep the V at bay. The night was cooling off when he walked in. Daniel looked like he owned the place, or at least like he thought he did, swaggering over with a confidence that, I guess, comes from wearing a suit that costs more than most people's rent. He pulled out the chair opposite me without asking. "Mind if I sit?" he finally said, after already sitting down. His smile was all charm, probably practiced. "Looks like you're already sitting," I replied, barely looking up from my coffee. He chuckled, the sound a bit too smooth. "I'm Daniel, and you are?" "Anya," I said curtly, giving him a quick once-over. Not my usual type, too polished, but admittedly good-looking. "So Anya, what brings a girl like you to a pricey haunt like this, all by yourself?" His tone had a touch of a tease, and I wasn't sure if I was amused or annoyed. "Just enjoying my coffee," I answered, keeping it vague. "What's your excuse?" I could say business, but I'd be lying tonight. "Let's just say I'm scouting for something interesting, and looks like I might have found it," he said, his gaze steady on me. I raised an eyebrow. "Hope the coffee lives up to your expectations then." Daniel laughed. "Something tells me it's already exceeded them." "I wasn't here to make friends, definitely not looking for a fling," I said, my voice firm. "Look, I'm not one of those girls who fall for a line, if that's what you're aiming for, and I'm certainly not interested in whatever game you're playing." "Who says I'm playing a game?" he asked, his voice lowering slightly. "Experience," I replied. "You sit down uninvited, start with a line, expect what? A phone number, a date?" He leaned back, looking genuinely amused. "Now you're tough, I like that. Not looking for a number, just conversation. But if it's too much, say the word, and I'll vanish." I considered him for a moment. Monte Carlo was beautiful, but lonely. Maybe a little chat wouldn't hurt. "Conversation is fine, but keep it light." We talked for a while, the conversation surprisingly easy. He didn't press for personal details, and I didn't offer any. As the night grew deeper, I realized that despite my initial reservations, I was actually enjoying the chat. Daniel wasn't like the typical guys who often tried to impress me with their wallets or connections. He had an air about him that suggested he was used to the finer things, but wasn't defined by them. Eventually, the evening cooled down, and it was time to go. "Well Daniel, this was unexpectedly pleasant," I said as I stood to leave. "Surprised yourself, huh?" he asked with a grin. "Maybe just a bit." "Good night, Daniel." As I walked back to my apartment, his words echoed slightly in my mind. Monte Carlo was indeed full of surprises, and perhaps, just perhaps, I'd stumbled upon one tonight. After that first encounter with Daniel, the nights in Monte Carlo seemed a bit less solitary. He had a knack for popping up wherever I was, whether I was checking out the local markets during the day or having a late dinner by myself. His persistence wasn't annoying, surprisingly, it was quite the opposite, maybe because he wasn't pushy. He just seemed genuinely interested in being around me. One breezy evening, as I was watching the sun dip below the horizon, he walked over, 2 coffees in hand, and sat down beside me without a word. "Assuming I wanted coffee?" I teased, raising an eyebrow. He handed me a cup. "If I'm wrong, I'll drink both." "Good guess then," I said, accepting the coffee. We sat in silence for a bit, the sound of the waves filling the quiet moments. "You never told me what you do back in the States," Daniel finally broke the silence. "Didn't think it mattered," I shrugged. "I work. Right now, I'm just enjoying not working." "Fair enough," he chuckled. "Everyone's got a story though, don't you think?" Over the next few days, we fell into an easy routine. Daniel showed me parts of Monte Carlo I hadn't explored yet. We talked about everything and nothing, movies, books, our favorite foods. He loved to argue about the best James Bond actor, staunchly defending Daniel Craig, while I was all about the classics like Sean Connery. One day, as we were strolling along the beach, he stopped suddenly and looked at me seriously, a look I hadn't seen before. "Anya, I know I'm just some guy you met at a cafe, but these past weeks have been, I don't know, different, better because of you." I stopped too, unsure how to respond. Feelings were not what I planned on dealing with here. "Daniel, I like hanging out with you, I do, but this is just a break for me. I'm not looking for complications." He nodded slowly, taking a deep breath. "I get it. No pressure. Just know that I'm here, okay? And I think you're pretty amazing." Days turned into weeks, and my time in Monte Carlo was drawing to a close. Daniel and I spent more and more time together, and what started as casual walks and talks turned into late-night dinners and early morning breakfasts. It was the last thing I expected, falling for someone under the Mediterranean stars. Then one evening, he dropped a bombshell. "Come back with me, Anya. Work at my company in the States." I know it's sudden, but I don't know, I just think it could be great. The idea was crazy, completely insane, and yet, part of me was tempted by the adventure, by the idea of taking this, whatever it was, and seeing where it could go. Moving back to the States felt like stepping into an alternate universe. Daniel's offer wasn't just a job, it was an invitation into his life, and suddenly, I was living in an ordinary apartment in an ordinary part of town, playing the role of an ordinary girl who'd lucked out. My father, however, had different ideas about ordinary. He showed up unannounced one afternoon, just as I was unpacking my last box. His booming laugh filled my small living room as he stood in the doorway, towering and larger than life. "Anya, hiding out in plain sight, huh?" he chuckled, giving me a big hug that almost crushed my ribs. "So tell me about this decision. This guy must be something special for you to up and move like this." His tone was light, but I could tell he was probing, doing his fatherly duty to sniff out any trouble. I sighed, sitting down on the couch. "His name's Daniel. He's different, Dad." "He doesn't know about all this," I said, waving vaguely around, implying the wealth and the complicated strings that came with it. Dad sat down next to me, his expression serious. "Now Anya, you know you can't keep that a secret forever. If he's going to be part of your life, he should know who you are." "I know, Dad. I want to be sure about him before I complicate things." "Thanks for looking out for me though." He ruffled my hair like he used to when I was a kid. "Always, kiddo. Just remember, if you need anything, I'm just a call away, and I've got eyes everywhere," he added with a wink. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of adjusting to my new job and new life. Daniel was a constant presence, supportive and as charming as ever, but there was an edge to him now, a sort of sharpness that came with the responsibilities he carried. One night, over a quiet dinner at my place, Daniel brought up a topic I'd been dreading. "Anya, when do you think I'll get to meet your parents? I feel like I'm missing a big part of your life." I paused, the weight of the moment settling over me. "Well, my mom passed away a long time ago, and my dad's just a regular trucker. We're not exactly on speaking terms right now." Daniel frowned, a hint of concern crossing his face. "I'm sorry to hear that, but you know, whenever you're ready, I'd like to meet him. Family is important." I nodded, appreciating his sentiment, but knowing full well the reality of my father's world, a world I wasn't ready to introduce Daniel to just yet. Life with Daniel moved at a pace I never expected. We were already blending our lives together. My job at his company was going great, and we were getting deeper into our relationship. I guess it all seemed like we were gearing up for something big, but I was still taken aback when that big moment actually happened. It was a normal evening. We were at his place, a cozy, upscale apartment with views of the city's skyline. We'd just finished dinner, nothing fancy, just some takeout because neither of us felt like cooking. We were sitting on the couch, a documentary about ocean life playing in the background, the kind you watch but don't really watch. Daniel turned to me, his expression more serious than the situation called for. He took my hand, and suddenly, I felt my heart start to race. Anya, I've been thinking about us, about everything we've been through, and everything I want for us in the future. I nodded, my mouth suddenly dry.
Yeah.
I love you, Anya. I love everything about you, and I don't want to imagine my life without you. He paused, and I could see him swallow hard, like he was nervous. That made two of us. I want to be with you, always. Will you marry me? Just like that. No getting down on one knee, no ring box being opened. It was straightforward, genuine, and so very Daniel. Yes, I said, the word coming out in a rush, almost a relief. Yes, I will. He flashed that wide, infectious grin that had won me over from day one and hugged me tight. We spent the rest of the evening talking about our future, what we wanted, where we saw ourselves. It was exciting and a bit daunting, but it felt right. The next challenge came when I told my dad. I expected him to be happy, but his response was lukewarm at best. Anya, you know I want nothing but your happiness, but are you sure about this? It's all happening so fast, he said, his voice heavy with concern. I'm sure, Dad. He's a great guy. You'll see. I tried to sound more confident than I felt. He sighed. All right, but promise me you'll sign a prenup, just to be safe. The word prenup didn't scare me, it was just another part of the modern marriage package, especially with someone who had as much to lose as I did, even if Daniel didn't know the full extent of it. Of course, Dad. We'll handle it, I assured him. That's good then. And Anya, I won't be at the wedding. I don't want to spoil your story about being a simple girl. Then came the introduction to Daniel's mother. Her reception was icy from the start. During dinner at their family home, she scrutinized me with a look that chilled the room. Daniel, are you sure about this girl? She doesn't seem like a fit for our family, she remarked bluntly. Daniel tried to smooth things over, but his mother was relentless. A prenuptial agreement is non-negotiable, she insisted. I agreed without hesitation, knowing it would ease some tension. Absolutely. I wouldn't have it any other way, I said, as we later formalized the terms with a lawyer present. Despite these hurdles, our wedding in the Maldives was breathtaking. Standing beside Daniel, with the ocean whispering behind us and the sand beneath our feet, I felt a surge of hope. It was just us, our love, and a future we were ready to shape together. Despite the rocky start with family expectations, married life started off better than I could have hoped. Daniel and I settled into our new house, a beautiful place with more space than we'd ever need. It was supposed to be the beginning of our perfect life together. I threw myself back into work, determined to prove that I was more than just the boss's wife. My role at the company had always been challenging, but now there was an added layer of expectations. I was not only managing projects, but was also part of key decision-making processes. Daniel seemed proud, at least initially. He would introduce me in meetings with a hint of pride in his voice. This is Anya, my wife, and our project lead. However, as the months rolled on and the projects under my lead turned successful, bringing in significant profits and boosting the company's profile, something in Daniel shifted. It was subtle at first, a comment here, a slight remark there. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, he brought it up. Anya, you're doing great at work, too great maybe. I looked up from my plate, puzzled. What do you mean, too great? Isn't that good for the company? It is, he admitted, pushing his food around on his plate. But you know, the guys are starting to say it's turning into Anya's show over there. His words stung a little. Isn't that a bit unfair? I thought you'd be happy that we're doing well. I am happy, but it's a lot, you know? Everyone's always talking about you, about how you handle things. Makes me wonder where I stand. That conversation was the first of many. As the business grew, so did the strain between us. Daniel's once supportive demeanor was now tinged with resentment. I couldn't understand it. Wasn't he the one who had encouraged me to step up in the first place? Things got worse when his mother came to stay with us for a few weeks. Her presence in the house brought an old-world, traditional attitude that I had always managed to avoid. She would make offhand comments about my work, about how a wife should be more present at home. "You're always at the office, Anya. When do you have time to take care of your husband?" she would say. I tried to shrug it off, to keep the peace, but her words only deepened the growing rift between Daniel and me. It seemed no amount of success at work could compensate for what was slowly unraveling at home. The more I achieved, the more our marriage suffered. One evening, Daniel came home from work, his face set in a grim line. "Anya, I think it's best if you leave the company. We need to focus on our family, and it seems like your role there it's just causing too much tension." "Leave the company, but why? I've been contributing so much." My voice was a mix of disbelief and anger. "It's for the best. You can focus on the house, maybe start that garden you've always talked about." His tone was dismissive, as if he was deciding on something trivial, not my career. The next day, I found out he had let go of all our house staff, housekeepers, cooks, gardeners. It was all on me now. "You wanted to be more involved at home, here's your chance," he said, almost coldly. I wasn't scared of housework, but the way this was thrown at me felt wrong. This wasn't the loving, caring man I married, this was someone else, someone very intolerant and controlling. His mother, staying with us at the time, seemed to relish the situation. "It's good for a wife to focus on her home," she would say, smirking slightly whenever Daniel talked about my new role as a full-time housewife. As I adjusted to this unexpected turn in my life, I couldn't help but feel ashamed that I hadn't seen this coming, ashamed to admit to my father that maybe he was right about Daniel. When Daniel suggested a trip to Monte Carlo, to maybe reignite what was left of our spark, I was hesitant, but hopeful. That hope died quickly when his mother announced she'd join us. "It's been ages since I've traveled," she declared loudly, as if it were a decree that couldn't be opposed. Daniel, of course, welcomed her with open arms, not once considering what I might think. We rented a small house in Monte Carlo, which was charming but costly, and it quickly became my prison rather than a retreat. From the start, Daniel and his mother treated the city as their playground. They rented luxurious cars, visited exclusive boutiques, and dined at the finest restaurants, while I was left to manage the household they demanded. Home-cooked meals turned me into nothing more than a servant in a holiday home, cooking and cleaning after them as they gallivanted around the city. As days passed, Daniel's mother's digs grew sharper, her tone more venomous. "Really, Anya, living at someone else's expense must be quite the life, huh?" she'd sneer, her words a slap disguised in a smirk. Daniel never defended me, instead, he laughed. His laughter was a betrayal each time, echoing around the cold walls of our temporary home. I felt isolated, the city sparkle muted by the shadow of their disdain. One evening, we passed a grand, old-style hotel, its facade a reminder of a world of elegance and respect. Daniel's mother, her voice dripping with envy, remarked, "Lucky billionaire Harris, imagine owning such a hotel, ruling over a palace like that." That night, at a restaurant overlooking the sea, the last vestige of my patience crumbled as we sat down. She waved the waiter over with an imperious flick of her wrist. "For Anya, the cheapest dish will do. No need to spoil her with extravagances, she doesn't deserve it," she declared loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. Daniel's response was a chuckle, his agreement coming not just from his mouth, but from the dismissive flip of his hand. "Good call, Mom. Let's not go overboard." Humiliation washed over me like the waves crashing on the rocks below us. Rising from my chair, the clatter of my seat echoing my turmoil, I faced them both, my voice steady, louder than I intended. "I will not tolerate this any longer," I declared, my hands trembling, but my resolve firm. "I am divorcing you, Daniel." The cold air of Monte Carlo was nothing compared to the chill of betrayal as I walked away from the restaurant. Daniel and his mother, rather than coming to apologize, followed me out with insults. As I quickened my pace, my mother-in-law's voice rang out sharp and clear. "Just look at her, a beggar, unworthy of my son." My heart raced, but before I could get far, Daniel caught up and grabbed my purse from my shoulder, his fingers clenching it tightly. "This is my money, Anya. Go on, get out on all fours if you have to." His voice was laced with contempt as he yanked the purse away, leaving me stunned on the sidewalk beside him. His mother laughed cruelly, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Maybe now you'll learn to beg in Monte Carlo, since that's all you're good for." Their laughter echoed down the street as I stood there, walletless and alone, but as they hurled their final insults, fate stepped in. We were near that grand old hotel, the one Daniel's mother had earlier envied, aloud wishing she could own such a place. Pointing to the hotel, she sneered, "Maybe they'll let you in as a beggar." At that moment, the gates of the hotel opened, and a guard appeared. He saw me, recognition lighting up his face. "Miss Harris," he called out warmly, walking over with a respectful salute. The moment he said my name, the atmosphere shifted. Daniel and his mother paused, their expressions turning from satisfaction to confusion. The guard smiled broadly. "Your father told us you might come by. Please, this way. The best room is always reserved for you." As for Mr. Harris's instructions. Daniel's mother's face paled, her earlier words turning to ash in her mouth. "Harris?" "As in the billionaire Harris," she stammered, her earlier bravado crumbling. Ignoring them both, I walked towards the guard, my posture straightening. "Thank you, Pierre," I said, my voice calm and collected. Inside, I felt a mix of relief and vindication. Behind me, Daniel's "please" began, his tone desperate. "Anya, please, I didn't mean." His mother, not to be outdone, shouted past her son. "Perhaps we could come in for a drink, at least?" I didn't look back. Entering the hotel, the doors closing behind me felt symbolic, shutting out the chaos of my old life. Pierre escorted me to the reception, where staff greeted me with the deference due to the daughter of their employer. The flight back to the United States was a long one, giving me plenty of time to ponder over my next steps. By the time I landed, my resolve had hardened like the city sidewalks, ready to be trodden upon, but unyielding to the pressure. The following day, I found myself in the office of a reputable lawyer, papers spread out before me like a battle map. "During your tenure at the company, it appears your husband failed to pay you bonuses owed for the multi-million-dollar deals you closed," the lawyer pointed out, his tone a mix of surprise and indignation. "That sounds about right," I sighed, my mind racing through the countless hours I'd poured into that company, the success I had driven. "We're suing for $3 million. The courtroom was cold and sterile, a stark contrast to the heated glares Daniel shot across the room as he stood there, fumbling through his defense. The man I once loved looked nothing short of pathetic. When the verdict came, a resounding victory awarding me $3 million, Daniel's face crumpled. Outside the courthouse, he attempted one last plea. "Anya, everyone's laughing at me. I messed up. Can we start over?" His words could have tugged at my heartstrings once, but that time had passed. "You only miss the money, Daniel. Maybe listen less to your mother next time," I said, the edge in my voice cutting through the crisp air. I turned and walked away, the sound of my heels against the pavement marking the end of that chapter. Returning home, I faced my father. The air between us was thick with unspoken words until I broke the silence. "Dad, I should have listened to you." He wrapped me in a hug, his embrace warm and forgiving. "You had to learn on your own. Now you know, and knowing is half the battle." We talked late into the night about life, mistakes, and new beginnings. His advice was a beacon as I navigated through my thoughts of the future. Inspired by our conversation, I began laying the groundwork for my next venture. My experience at Daniel's company had not only honed my skills but ignited a passion for the industry I couldn't deny. I decided to open my own investment firm. With my expertise and the hefty settlement, I had the resources to start something meaningful, something mine. Weeks turned into months as I built my business from the ground up. The challenges were daunting, But every setback taught me a lesson, every success a confirmation that I was on the right path. Sitting in my new office, overlooking the bustling streets below, I realized how far I'd come from a disillusioned wife in a loveless marriage to a competent business owner. The journey had been fraught with hurdles, but each one had made me stronger. Thanks for watching. How did you find the story? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more awesome stories like this. Your feedback and support mean a lot.
Well, it looks like our not-so-educated daughter-in-law, the plain and boring one, is about to bless us with her singing, my mother-in-law said with a smirk. Come on, step up to the stage, you ugly duckling, she sneered. It was my sister-in-law's wedding reception, and somehow I had been pushed into singing a solo. This wasn't unusual. My mother-in-law always seemed to find a way to make me feel small and humiliated, even at happy events like this. Her need to embarrass me whenever she had the chance was something I couldn't quite wrap my head around. What's taking so long? Hurry up, she said, sounding more impatient. Her voice grew sharp, and I knew I had to move quickly. Okay, I'm coming, I said softly. I stood up and slowly walked toward the stage, feeling everyone's eyes on me. My name is Emily, and I'm 34 years old. I live with my 5-year-old daughter, Jessica, and my husband, Eric, who's also 34. We've been married for 8 years now. I was orphaned when I was little, and my grandparents raised me. I chose to live on my own when I was older, leaving high school early to work at a local factory. Eric and I met again at our high school reunion when we were 22. We hit it off right away and started dating. 3 years after he finished college, we got married. Since then, I've been taking care of our home, raising our daughter, and working part-time to help out while supporting Eric in every way I can. Mom, teach me how to sing, Jessica asked me the other day. Eric and I hadn't planned on pushing her toward music or anything like that, but Jessica showed an interest all on her own. I used to be the president of the choir club back in high school, and singing has always been one of my favorite hobbies. I even take voice lessons now just for fun. So when Jessica asked me, I was more than happy to help her learn. I dream of the day we might sing together as a family. A few days after the wedding, we returned home, and my mother-in-law called. As always, she found a way to criticize me. Since she learned that I didn't finish high school, she's constantly made comments about my lack of education and my family background. Hello, is Jessica there? She asked when I picked up the phone. I'm sorry, she's at her singing lesson right now. I replied without thinking, realizing a little too late that I had said something I shouldn't have. She's taking singing lessons? And you didn't tell me? You really don't think things through, do you? She said, annoyed. I'll teach her myself, she added firmly. Now, my mother-in-law has an impressive musical background, but the way she talks down to me when it comes to music and education drives me crazy. She loves Jessica, but I'm worried her strict methods might push our daughter away, just like they did with Eric and his sister when they were younger. Thank you for the offer, but I want Jessica to have her own freedom with this, I told her. Well, I still think it would be better if I taught her, she said before abruptly ending the call. Months went by, and I nearly forgot about that conversation. But then one day, my mother-in-law came over to visit. It's been a while, hasn't it? How's Jessica doing? She asked as she walked through the door, immediately picking Jessica up without much of a greeting to us. It just so happened that Jessica had the day off from her voice class, and all of us were home. Granny, I've gotten really good at singing, Jessica said proudly. Really? Let's hear you sing something then, my mother-in-law responded. I felt a knot form in my stomach, worried about what she might say after hearing Jessica sing. How about we eat first? It's lunchtime, I tried to suggest, hoping to delay the moment. Don't interrupt. Let her sing. My mother-in-law snapped at me. Go ahead, Jessica. Sing for Granny, I said softly. Jessica started singing, and I stood there, feeling uneasy. From my mother-in-law's perspective, As someone who graduated at the top of her class from a prestigious music school, Jessica's singing probably seemed far from perfect. But to my surprise, when Jessica finished, my mother-in-law clapped. "You've been practicing a lot, haven't you?" "Well done," she said, smiling. I sighed in relief. For once, she wasn't making any snide remarks, and Jessica looked so happy to be praised by her grandmother. Eric leaned over and whispered to me. I was a little worried about what Mom might say, but it turned out okay. Later that evening, Jessica fell asleep, so I picked her up and took her to her room. When I returned to the living room, my mother-in-law was waiting. "Emily, don't you think Jessica's singing was terrible today? It's a waste of money to keep sending her to those lessons if that's all they're teaching her." "I'll take over and teach her myself," she declared. Anger rose inside me. I turned to Eric, hoping he'd back me up. "Wait, isn't that a bit selfish?" I asked him. "What about what Jessica wants? She's so excited about music, and if she's forced to learn under too much pressure, she might end up hating it." Eric was quiet for a few minutes before finally saying, "Mom, go ahead and teach Jessica for a while." I couldn't believe my ears. Was he serious? How could he just agree like that without considering Jessica's feelings? I was furious. All I wanted to do was wake Jessica up, grab her, and leave. "So, I guess this means Jessica will quit her voice training classes now, right?" my mother-in-law asked with a triumphant smile. I stood firm. "Fine, but this is not a music conservatory. Don't do anything that Jessica wouldn't like," I said sharply. "I know what I'm doing. After all, I'm not uneducated like you," she replied coldly. That evening, I let my mother-in-law leave without saying much. Later that night, my husband, Eric, apologized for his mother's behavior. But I was too upset to even look at him, let alone have a conversation. I ignored him and went straight to bed. The next morning, I went to my daughter, Jessica, and said gently, "Sweetie, from today onward, instead of going to your voice lessons, Grandma is going to teach you how to sing here at home, okay?" Her face fell. She looked sad but didn't say anything. She just nodded, trying to be brave. I felt guilty the moment I saw her expression. "I'm really sorry, Jessica," I whispered, hugging her. Around noon, my mother-in-law showed up at our house, all smiles. "Jessica, starting today, Grandma is going to teach you how to sing even better," she said with enthusiasm. The lesson began shortly after, but within an hour, things took a turn for the worse. My mother-in-law's teaching style was harsh and demanding. She began criticizing Jessica, expecting nothing less than perfection from a 5-year-old. "You're doing it wrong again. You're making the same mistake. Do it over," she snapped at Jessica, who looked more and more discouraged as the lesson went on. I couldn't hold back any longer. "Mother-in-law, this isn't what we agreed on, is it? Could you be a little gentler with her?" She shot me a cold look. "What are you talking about? I am being gentle. Why don't you go do some housework quietly, something you can barely handle anyway," she said with a sneer. For long hours passed before the lesson finally ended. My mother-in-law stood up, satisfied. "Well, see you tomorrow, Jessica. Make sure to practice what we went over today," she said as she left, pleased with herself. As soon as she was gone, Jessica sat in her chair, looking miserable. "If I'm going to get yelled at like this, I don't want to sing anymore," she said softly. My heart broke for her. I felt a deep anger toward my mother-in-law for ruining something my daughter had once loved, all for her own pride and satisfaction. I made up my mind. This couldn't continue. The next few days were much of the same. My mother-in-law continued her strict lessons, and Jessica became more and more withdrawn. After about a week, Jessica finally came to me and said, "Mom, I don't want Grandma to teach me anymore. I don't want to sing." I wasn't surprised. Her grandmother's teaching style was too harsh for her. "You don't have to force yourself, sweetie. If you don't want to continue, that's okay. You don't have to go back to Grandma's lessons," I reassured her. I paused for a moment, then asked, "What about going back to your old voice class? You liked it there, right?" Jessica's face brightened. It was clear she didn't hate singing. She just didn't like how her grandmother made her feel. "Would you like to go back?" asked again. Jessica nodded eagerly, and I smiled, relieved that she hadn't lost her love for music. The next day, I called my mother-in-law. I'm sorry, but Jessica has decided to go back to her original voice training class, I explained. My mother-in-law was furious. How can she give up after just a week? You've raised such a weak-minded child. This is all your fault, she yelled. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. That might be true, I replied, but Jessica told me that she prefers her voice teacher's style. Maybe it's because your way of teaching is just too strict for her. My mother-in-law continued ranting, but I didn't listen. I hung up, feeling satisfied. It didn't matter how many awards she'd won or how prestigious her background was. In the end, her own granddaughter preferred a different teacher over her. After that, the visits from my mother-in-law stopped altogether. I felt a sense of relief. That evening, I told Eric what had happened. I spoke to your mom and let her know she doesn't need to teach Jessica anymore. Jessica doesn't want her to. Eric looked apologetic. I'm really sorry, Emily. I didn't realize how bad things had gotten. I thought she wouldn't be so strict with Jessica, but I was wrong. His words eased some of my anger, but I was still upset that he had suggested letting his mom take over Jessica's lessons in the first place. I was so mad when you agreed to let her quit voice lessons for this. I was ready to scream. I admitted. Eric sighed. I know. I should have backed you up from the beginning. I'm really sorry. In the end, I decided to forgive him. Thankfully, Jessica still loved music and was happy to be back in her class. That's what mattered most to me. 2 weeks later, Eric brought up something unexpected. My sister is getting married next month, and she asked if we could perform at her wedding. I raised an eyebrow. What kind of performance are we talking about? I'm planning to get a few of my band members together and do a small concert, but my sister also wants you and my mom to sing with us, he explained. I wasn't thrilled about the idea of singing with my mother-in-law, but I reluctantly agreed. So, I'll be singing with your mom? I asked just to be sure. Eric nodded. Yeah, that's what my sister wants. The thought of performing alongside my mother-in-law made me nervous, but a part of me couldn't help but wonder. What if I sang better than her? What would she say then? I started practicing right away, preparing for the performance. However, my mother-in-law didn't seem to be doing the same. Mother, aren't you going to practice? I asked her, curious. I don't need to practice, she scoffed. I'm already much better than you. Practice is for people like you who aren't very good. Her response didn't surprise me, but it still stung. Despite her confidence, I was determined to give my best performance, even if it meant proving her wrong. I decided that arguing with my mother-in-law wasn't worth it, so I just focused on getting ready for the wedding performance. Once we agreed on which song to sing, I started going to my voice lessons even more often. I was determined not to give my mother-in-law any more reasons to make fun of me, and I was also nervous about performing in front of people after such a long time without proper training. On the day of my sister-in-law's wedding, everything went smoothly during the ceremony, and soon it was time for the entertainment portion. My husband, Eric, took the stage first and started playing his music. Since he plays regularly, he looked completely confident and relaxed. His music was beautiful, and he had a calm, elegant presence that captivated everyone. I couldn't help but admire him as I watched. But then, out of nowhere, my mother-in-law turned to me and said, I'm not feeling well today. Why don't you sing by yourself? I was shocked. What? That's so sudden. You can't just drop this on me. I protested. Well, there's nothing we can do. Or are you too embarrassed to sing in front of everyone because you're uneducated and ugly? She said, without any guilt or hesitation. That's when I realized she was doing this on purpose. She wanted to humiliate me, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it. You know what? I've been practicing hard, so I'm not embarrassed to sing. I asked you several times if you wanted to practice, but you didn't. Could it be that you're the one who's actually afraid of singing in front of everyone? I shot back. My mother-in-law's face turned red with anger. That's not true, she raised her voice, and people around us started to look over, wondering what was happening. I quickly apologized to the people nearby for the commotion, then leaned in closer to her and whispered, for someone who graduated top of their class from a music school, you sure talk a lot about teaching others. Are you backing out because you know I'll sing better than you? She glared at me. Of course not. If I sang with someone as uneducated and ugly as you, it would just throw me off. You and your parents must be really incompetent if this is the best you can do, she sneered, not only insulting me but also my family. I was embarrassed and furious at the same time. I wanted to run out of there, but I knew that's exactly what she wanted. So, instead of backing down, I stood my ground. What are you waiting for? Get up there already, she snapped. Fine, I will, I replied, trying to stay calm. As Eric finished his performance, I stood up and made my way to the stage. Originally, I was supposed to sing with my mother-in-law, but since she claimed she wasn't feeling well, I was on my own. Instead of singing the song we had planned, I decided to sing an opera piece I used to perform a lot in the past, an aria from The Marriage of Figaro. As I started singing, I was amazed at how well I was doing. All the vocal training I had done seemed to pay off, and I hit every note perfectly. My voice was stronger and more beautiful than I had imagined it could be. The audience seemed mesmerized, whispering things like, "Wow, her voice is incredible," and "Is she a professional?" When I finished the song, the room erupted into applause. People stood up, clapping and cheering. I was overwhelmed by the response. I took a moment to address the crowd, saying, "Congratulations on your wedding, sister-in-law. I used to be the choir leader in high school, but it's been a few years since I sang in front of people. I was a bit nervous, but how did I do? Thanks so much for listening." I went back to my seat, feeling proud, and my daughter, Jessica, ran up to me with wide eyes. "Mom, your voice was so beautiful. Can you teach me to sing like that?" she asked eagerly. Just as I was enjoying the moment, my mother-in-law couldn't help but make a snide remark. "Oh, anyone can sing like that. Don't get ahead of yourself," she said, her jealousy showing. I thought the entertainment part of the wedding was over, but then something surprising happened. My sister-in-law stood up and said, "Mom, I'd love for you to sing too." My mother-in-law looked completely caught off guard.
"What? Me?" she stammered.
"Yes, I've never heard you sing before, Mom, and since you taught me so much about music growing up, I'd really like to hear you perform," my sister-in-law said, completely sincere. The guests around us started chiming in. "Yes, you should sing. We've heard you were the top student at your music school." With all eyes on her, my mother-in-law had no choice but to agree. "All right, if you all insist," she said, standing up and making her way to the stage. As she stepped up, the room was buzzing with excitement. Everyone expected an incredible performance from her. But as soon as she started singing, something strange happened. There were murmurs in the crowd. People were whispering, "Wait, is she serious? No way." Her voice, which was supposed to be polished and professional, was shaky and off-key. It was nothing like the performance people had imagined from someone with her credentials. I sat back in my chair, feeling a mix of shock and vindication. My mother-in-law, who had spent years boasting about her musical achievements and belittling others, was faltering in front of everyone. She finished her song to scattered applause, far from the standing ovation I had received. When she returned to her seat, she looked completely deflated. For once, she didn't have anything critical to say. After the wedding, things changed. My mother-in-law stopped criticizing me about my singing, and she didn't bring up teaching Jessica anymore. It was as if she had finally realized that her harsh ways weren't the only way to succeed in music or in life. And as for me, I felt like I had finally stood up to her, proving to myself that I didn't need her approval to be confident in my abilities. The performance had given me back the confidence I hadn't realized I had lost. I couldn't help but notice how off my mother-in-law's voice was during her performance. Even considering that, her singing was terrible. For someone who loved to criticize others' singing, she sure struggled to hit the right notes. To be honest, I felt like I was a much better singer. The atmosphere grew uncomfortable as she finished her performance. Unlike when I sang, the room was filled with awkward silence, and the applause was scattered. It was as if people wished they hadn't witnessed it. When my mother-in-law returned to our table, her face red with embarrassment, she angrily said to me, "This is why I didn't want to sing. If you had sung properly, my daughter wouldn't have asked me to do this." I was confused. I thought my sister-in-law had genuinely wanted her mother to sing at her wedding. She had been taught by her mother for years and probably wanted to share that moment. "Don't you think she genuinely wanted you to sing?" I asked, trying to calm her down. "No way. I'm sure she knew I was bad at singing and just wanted to embarrass me," she snapped. I was shocked. Here was a woman who constantly criticized others, yet she didn't want to perform because she knew she wasn't good. She would judge others but couldn't handle being judged herself. I realized that her self-centered attitude could even crush my daughter's love for music. Unable to hold back anymore, I replied with sarcasm. "So, a person who graduated from a top music school can only criticize others because they can't sing themselves? Well, at least you didn't have to sing with someone as terrible as me."
How dare you say that?
"It's your fault I embarrassed myself in front of everyone," she shouted. "It's not fair to say that in front of your daughter." "I'm sure she's happy just hearing you sing," I said firmly. My mother-in-law fell silent, and there was a murmur among the guests who had overheard our conversation. The rest of the ceremony went smoothly, but it was clear that my mother-in-law wasn't happy. 2 days later, she stormed into our house, demanding an apology. "I can't let it go. You need to apologize for what happened at the wedding." I was taken aback. "What exactly am I apologizing for? I didn't realize your singing was that bad. If anything, you owe an apology to Jessica."
What?
"I have nothing to apologize for," she yelled. "Not to me, to Jessica." She almost started hating music because of how harsh you were with her. "You've always bragged about your music education, but is this really what you learned at that school? Tormenting a child because things don't go your way." I shot back. I continued. "I've never been trained by you, yet I managed to sing at the wedding and got applause. How about I give you some singing lessons?" My mother-in-law stood there, speechless. I had finally stood up to her in a way she couldn't argue with. "If you have nothing else to say, please leave. I won't let you interfere with my daughter's or my husband's music anymore." Without another word, she left the house, her shoulders slumped in defeat. I felt a wave of satisfaction. I had fought back in the one area where she always tried to lord over me: music. All those years of voice training paid off. Without it, I wouldn't have been able to receive the applause I got at the wedding, and I certainly wouldn't have been able to hold my ground against her. Since the wedding, things have changed. My mother-in-law still visits occasionally, but she no longer makes snide comments about my daughter's singing. I don't mind her visits now because the constant criticism has stopped. My daughter Jessica, who has been practicing hard, is working on a challenging song from her music class. "Mom, this song is tough, but I'm going to practice until I can sing it perfectly," Jessica said, determined. "That's great, honey. You're going to do so well." I encouraged her, even though I didn't fully understand the technical difficulties of the song. It made me proud just to see her working so hard. One day, while my mother-in-law was visiting, she overheard Jessica and me talking about the song. "Emily, this song is difficult. You can't just tell her to do her best." "Jessica, let me show you how to sing it properly," she said, surprisingly kind and patient as she gave Jessica some advice. "Oh, thank you, Grandma. It's easier now," Jessica said, happy to receive her help. This was a different side of my mother-in-law. She had always looked down on people who didn't go to music school, but now, after seeing how I could sing without formal training, she seemed to have a change of heart. "Emily, I used to think that only people with degrees in music were good enough. But after seeing you perform, I've realized that music is about enjoying it, not about where you studied. Could you teach me to sing next time?" she asked, surprising me. I couldn't help but smile. The sarcastic comment I made after the wedding must have had an effect on her. "Well, I teach tough lessons, you know," I joked. "I won't be harsh anymore, I promise." I even feel sorry for Eric now, but it's too late to change the past. "I'm ready for your tough lessons," she replied, a little sheepishly. With that, the tension between us started to ease. We even began going to karaoke together and became close enough to enjoy singing together. I hope that one day, when Jessica improves even more, the four of us, me, Eric, Jessica, and my mother-in-law, can have a fun jam session together. Welcome to the Retaliation Realm channel. We hope you enjoy today's story. After my brother got married and moved out, it's just been my mom and me living together. Lately, I've been feeling frustrated with her, but I'm grateful for how she raised me, so I can't just ignore her. I never thought she would treat me like this. Even though I've been helping her out with money, she still kicked me out of the house, all because of my brother and his wife. I'm angry with them for what they did. My name is Diana, and I'm 25 years old. My dad died a few years ago, and my brother William, who's 10 years older than me, left after getting married, so now it's just me and my mom. Honestly, I don't like living with her. Once I started working, she stopped her part-time job and just lounged around at home. Plus, she treats me like her maid, always asking me to do things for her. She'd say things like, "Diana, is dinner ready yet?" Or, "I need an extra $200 this month." It feels like the list of demands never ends. Some people might say I should just move out if I'm so unhappy, and I've thought about it many times. My mom's been my rock ever since my dad passed away. She raised me all on her own while my brother William moved away after he got married. His wife Catherine doesn't want to live with mom, so I can't rely on him much. As her daughter, I never even considered leaving her behind. But hey, I'm human too. Just because she's my real mom doesn't mean I have to put up with everything. Today, I got a bit upset and accidentally raised my voice at her. I noticed some money missing from my wallet and asked if she had taken it. She got defensive, saying she just borrowed it for clothes, but she never pays me back for the money she takes without asking. Every time I try to talk to her about it, she brings up how she raised me all by herself and how I owe everything to her. It's frustrating. I know she worked hard for me, and I appreciate it, but I'm not a kid anymore. I have a good job and enough money. Even if I gave her $2,000 every month, it wouldn't change my lifestyle much. I always felt like I couldn't let my mom have her way forever. Then one day after work, I came home to find William and Catherine there. I hadn't seen him since Dad's funeral, and we hadn't kept in touch. William, being his usual insensitive self, started making snide remarks about me. "Why are you here, William?" I asked. "Do you need a reason to visit your parents' house?" He replied. "But this apartment is mine. We had to sell our family home after Dad passed away, and I'm the one renting this place." Catherine, William's wife, joined in, commenting on how uptight I am and how I'll never get married with that attitude. She said it without any remorse, just like William. I've never really liked either of them. After dinner, I escaped to my room. My mom, probably happy to see William after so long, chatted away with them, smiling. It felt like they occasionally gossiped about me. Since that day, William and Catherine started coming over more often, and what bothers me is that they act like this is their home. They're way too comfortable in my apartment. "Hey, William, what's going on?" "This is my place," I said. "You know what about it? What does my job have to do with you?" "I'm here because I'm worried about Mom and want to visit her often. You never bothered to reach out since Dad's funeral. It's none of your business, and speaking of business, I'm hungry. Cook something and do it quick," William replied. "What's with this guy? Seriously, this is my place. Why are they lounging around like they own it? I want to eat a delicious cake, Diana." "Buy me one," my mom said. And even my mom joins in. "Buy it on your way back from work today, all right? So hurry up and go get it for us, you lazy girl." Catherine, who used to avoid my mom, suddenly seems to be getting along with her very well. As for William, he's projecting this "I'm the eldest son" vibe, and Catherine's playing along as the eldest son's wife, acting all concerned about Mom. But I can tell they're up to something. Something I'm not sure of yet, but I'm certain it's not good. After a few days, their plan finally becomes clear. "Diana, I've had it living with you. I've decided to end this," my mom said abruptly while I was doing some chores on my day off. "What do you mean by that exactly?" I asked, taken aback. "I can't stand living with someone as slow, lazy, and unattractive as you anymore," she replied coldly. "What are you talking about? Don't you get it? I've made up my mind. I'm going to live with William and Catherine." You're going to live with William and Catherine? I repeated in shock, unable to comprehend what she was saying. I couldn't believe what was happening. My brother, who always hated the idea of living with my mother, suddenly wanted to live with her. What on earth is happening? Just then, William and Catherine conveniently arrived. William, what's going on? You never reached out to us before, and you always said you'd never live with Mom, right? What's the problem? I asked. It's only natural for the eldest son to live with his mother, isn't it? William said, looking down on me with a sense of superiority. That's not what I'm saying. But then it's fine for Mom to live with us, right? I retorted, are you serious? Even Catherine was against living together. Why the sudden change? You're so annoying. Anyway, Mom's decided to live with us. We don't need you anymore. Just leave. Wait, leave? After all this time when he left everything about Mom up to me, I couldn't help but feel disgusted with my brother, who always spoke so arrogantly. However, it became clear that William and Catherine were up to something no good. Although my mother always had a sharp tongue, she's still my precious parent. Besides, I didn't want to get involved in any trouble later on, so I decided to confront my mother. Mom, isn't it obvious that something's going on? After all, William and his wife never once contacted us before. What are you talking about? If anyone's acting strange, it's you, my mom replied. Huh? Mom. Those who just leech off their parents should just leave, I said, feeling hurt. The moment she said that, any affection I had left for my mother vanished instantly. After all the support I've given and taking care of her, how dare she say something like that to her daughter? I couldn't believe they were mocking me like this, especially after all the years I've supported them. Well, they'll regret it soon enough. After a week, they'll experience hell, so they better enjoy this moment. I started planning my revenge on them, but before I leave, I need to make one thing clear. I'm leaving now, I declared firmly to my brother, his wife, and my mother. The three of them began chatting, smirking at each other. Diana, you're finally leaving the house, Mom said. You must be so happy, William, she continued. I truly am. Now I can live with William and Catherine. I'm on top of the world. From now on, I'll be the one taking care of Mom, William replied. Thank you, William. I'm also happy that I can live with my beloved mother-in-law from now on. Oh, thank you too, Catherine, William's wife chimed in. To be honest, I struggled not to laugh at that moment, but I couldn't let them think I had any leeway to execute my revenge perfectly. It's best to lay low for now. From that day on, my brother and his wife seemed to be constantly in my apartment. As for me, it's as if I'm invisible to them, or rather, they treated me as if I never existed in the first place. However, this was advantageous for me because I wasn't bothered at all while preparing to move out a week later. It was my moving day today. Today is the day we part ways, Diana. We'll be taking care of Mom from now on, so you can live without any worries, William said casually. Thank you. I'm leaving Mom in your hands, okay? I replied. After saying this, William seemed somewhat unsatisfied with my response. Then my mother approached. I hope you get married soon, Diana. It'd be a shame to remain single for the rest of your life, wouldn't it? You know the whole society would call a person like you a loser, my mother said. At her words, William and his wife snickered. I responded calmly, that's true. From now on, I've decided to live just for myself. I mean, I no longer have to take care of you now, right? Just stop talking and get out. I never asked you to look after me. I was going to leave quickly anyway. Oh, seems like they're here, I said, hearing the doorbell ring. I headed to the entrance. It was the movers from the moving company I had scheduled for today. After having them carry out all the belongings from my room, I pointed to the living room and told the movers, oh, and please move all the appliances and furniture in these rooms too. The dumbfounded voices of the three harmonized perfectly. They were completely confused about what was happening. That TV, the fridge, the microwave, oh, and this cleaning robot too. Also, the sofa, dining table, and the bed. Please move everything, I instructed. Then my mother began to argue. What? What are you thinking? Stop this immediately. What do you mean? Are you doing something strange? Don't play down taking all the appliances and furniture from this house. Have you lost your mind? My brother, whose face was as red as a William Otto, approached me aggressively. Yo, listen to Mom. How do you expect us to live without any furniture or appliances? You have no right to take everything. Leave everything here and just go. My mother and brother were squawking in front of me. Thinking I shouldn't waste any more time, I clarified the situation to the two. Hey, are you getting the wrong idea or something? Everything in this apartment, including the apartment itself and all of its appliances and furniture, is all mine. You know this is Mom's place, right? Don't mess with me. All the furniture and appliances were bought using the inheritance from Dad, weren't they? I clarified. I knew it. He's just an idiot. As I had anticipated, he misunderstood and believed that my mother was financing everything in my apartment. He assumed that she had received a lot of inheritance from my father and had cleverly convinced them to live with her. William, aren't you misunderstanding something? I bought everything in here. I've been giving Mom a monthly support of $2,000, you know. Thus, I've lost. You just want to live with Mom, don't you? Someday I'll inherit Dad's inheritance, I explained. Huh? What are you talking about? Mom used up all of Dad's inheritance a long time ago, I added. William nervously glanced at her mother. She was looking down, her face pale. Mom, please explain. You told us you bought all the appliances in here, William demanded. Well, I was just trying to look good, my mother confessed. Huh? What do you mean by that? We only moved in with you because we thought there was an inheritance from Dad. If there's no inheritance, what's the point of living together? William exclaimed. Wait, what are you saying? Didn't you say you take care of me because you're the eldest son? William asked. I was just trying to be nice. I lied so that we can live together, my mother admitted. Upon learning that there was no remaining inheritance, William was furious, and my mother was deeply shaken by the realization that the kindness shown by William and his wife was all fake. What a hopeless family, huh? My mother should have suspected something when William and his wife, who hadn't been in touch for a while, suddenly proposed living together. I thought to myself as I gave the two cold looks. William's wife seemed to have an idea and spoke up. It would be great if Diana could live with us again. My mother and William both agreed. That's right, Diana. You should live with us after all, William insisted. Yes, Diana, I do need you, my mother added. Seeing the drastic change in their attitude as they began speaking for their convenience, I quickly dismissed them right away. What are you even saying? Don't make me laugh. There's no way I'd live with trashy people like you. I decided to live only for myself from now on, I declared firmly. Whatever happens to you all, I couldn't care less. But why don't you all just happily ruin your lives together? I remarked coldly. The three of them, completely drained of energy, sat down on the spot as if their knees gave away. They all had empty eyes. Goodbye. Do your best as a family, I said as I closed the front door. In just another 2 weeks, the lease for the apartment would end. Because it's under my name, they'll probably be forced to leave when the lease is up. Well, it's none of my business anymore. About a week after I successfully moved, as expected, I received a call from my mother asking for help. Diana, please. I can't live properly like this. Come back, she pleaded. There's no way I'm coming back. Why don't you have that idiotic couple take care of you? I retorted. It seems they quit their work and moved here thinking I still had your father's inheritance, my mother confessed. They are terrible people, aren't they? I don't even feel like helping out at all. I don't need a couple who only thinks about money anymore. All I have is you, Diana, she pleaded. Mom, I'm busy. Can I hang up now, please? I said, cutting her off. I hung up the call before she could finish and blocked her number. I no longer felt the urge to help my mother, especially not now. Rumor has it that my mother and William's family got evicted from the apartment after that incident. They ended up spending all of William's savings to move into a shabby apartment. My mother doesn't work, and she argues with Catherine almost every day. William is the only one who has a job, working from dawn till dusk just to make ends meet. As for me, after distancing myself from my mother, I've been able to save more money and use it for my own needs. After all these sacrifices I've made in the past, I want to lead a life that makes me happy from now on. Thank you for being with us and listening until the end. If you found it interesting, please subscribe, give us a like, and leave your comments. We'll see you on the Retaliation Realm channel. My name is Rachel Whitaker, and I've spent the last decade trying to forget the family I left behind. But as I stood in the opulent ballroom of the Grand Plaza Hotel, watching my younger sister Daphne twirl in her wedding gown, I realized some wounds never truly heal. You're nothing without us, Rachel. You owe us everything. My mother Miriam's voice sliced through the crowd's chatter, sharp as a scalpel. I gripped my champagne flute tighter, willing myself to stay calm. I don't owe you anything, Mother, I replied, keeping my voice low. I built my life on my own terms. Miriam's eyes narrowed, her perfectly painted lips curling into a sneer. Is that what you tell yourself to sleep at night? That you're some self-made success story? Before I could respond, Daphne appeared at our mother's side, her veil trailing behind her like a gossamer cloud. Oh, Rachel, she cooed, false sweetness dripping from every syllable. I'm so glad you could make it. I was worried you'd be too busy with your… What is it you do again? Consulting. I bit back a retort. I run my own tech firm, Daphne. As you well know. Daphne waved her hand dismissively. Right. Well, isn't it nice that you could take time away from your little business to celebrate your only sister's special day? I forced a smile. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Speaking of missing things, Miriam interjected, her gaze sweeping the room. Where's that husband of yours? Eli, wasn't it? The one from the esteemed Whitaker family? He's parking the car, I said, silently willing Eli to hurry up and join me in this lion's den. Daphne's fiancé, Clive, approached our little group, his arms snaking around my sister's waist. Rachel, so good to finally meet you in person. I've heard so much about you. I doubted that, but I shook his offered hand anyway. Likewise, Clive. Congratulations on your big day. Clive's grip lingered a moment too long. You know, Rachel, I've been following your company's progress. Impressive stuff. We should talk business sometime. Daphne's smile faltered for a moment before she quickly recovered. Oh, darling, let's not bore Rachel with shop talk. It's our wedding day. I caught the flash of irritation in Clive's eyes before he masked it with a jovial laugh. Of course, my love. Just making conversation. Rachel. Eli's voice cut through the tension like a lifeline. I turned to see my husband striding towards us, looking dashing in his tailored suit. There you are, I said, relief washing over me as he planted a kiss on my cheek. Miriam's eyes darted between us, her disapproval palpable. Well, isn't this cozy? The prodigal daughter returns with her prince charming. Eli, ever the diplomat, smiled warmly. It's good to see you, Miriam. Daphne, you look stunning. Clive, congratulations. As pleasantries were exchanged, I caught Daphne eyeing Eli with poorly concealed envy. It was a look I'd seen countless times growing up, whenever I achieved something she couldn't. You know, Rachel, Daphne said, her voice sickly sweet, it's such a shame you've been so absent from our lives. We could have been so close if you hadn't run off to play career woman. I felt Eli's hand on the small of my back, steadying me. I think Rachel's done quite well for herself, he said, his tone light but firm. Miriam scoffed. Yes, well, some of us prioritize family over personal gain. The words hung in the air, heavy with years of resentment and unspoken accusations. I took a deep breath, ready to defend myself, when the wedding planner appeared, ushering Daphne away for photos. As they walked away, I heard my mother mutter, "You think you can just walk away from your family? We made you who you are." I watched them go, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Eli squeezed my hand. "You okay?" he whispered. I nodded, forcing a smile. "I'm fine. It's just one day, right?" But as I looked around the room, at the faces of relatives I barely recognized and the life I'd left behind, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The past, it seemed, wasn't done with me yet. As the wedding reception dragged on, I found myself seeking refuge on the hotel's balcony. The cool night air a welcome respite from the suffocating atmosphere inside. Eli joined me, his hand resting comfortingly on my shoulder. "You think you can just walk away from your family? We made you who you are." Miriam's voice echoed in my head, her earlier words still stinging. "Want to talk about it?" Eli asked gently. I sighed, leaning against the railing. "It's just being here, seeing them again. It's bringing back everything I've tried so hard to forget." Memories flooded back, unbidden. The constant comparisons to Daphne, the cutting remarks about my appearance, my choices, my very existence. The way Miriam's eyes would light up when Daphne entered a room, while I faded into the background. "You were always so dramatic, Rachel." Daphne's voice cut through my reverie. She stood in the doorway, champagne flute in hand. "Still playing the victim after all these years?" I straightened, steeling myself. "I'm not playing anything, Daphne. I'm living my life on my terms." She laughed, the sound brittle and forced. "Oh, please. You ran away because you couldn't handle not being the center of attention for once. Is that what you tell yourself?" I shot back. "That I left because I was jealous of you?" Daphne's eyes narrowed. "Why else would you abandon your family? We needed you, Rachel. But you were too selfish to see beyond your own nose." Eli stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "I think that's enough, Daphne. It's your wedding day. Why don't you go enjoy it?" She glared at him, then at me. "You always did have a knack for getting others to fight your battles, didn't you, Rachel?" With that, she spun on her heel and stalked back inside. I let out a shaky breath. "I'm sorry you had to see that." Eli pulled me close. "You have nothing to apologize for. Your sister, on the other hand, she's always been like this," I murmured. "Competitive, jealous." And Miriam encouraged it, pitting us against each other. "You've come so far, Rachel," Eli said softly. "Look at what you've built. Your company, our family. You did that, not them." I nodded, trying to draw strength from his words. But the doubts still lingered, a poisonous whisper in the back of my mind. Had I really succeeded in spite of my family, or was I still that scared little girl, desperate for approval? As if on cue, Clive appeared, his smile just a touch too wide. "There you are. I've been looking everywhere for you, Rachel. I was hoping we could chat about that business proposition." I exchanged a glance with Eli. "Clive, I appreciate the interest, but this really isn't the time or place." He waved a hand dismissively. "Nonsense. There's no better time to discuss the future than at a wedding, right? I've got some ideas that could really benefit both of us." The eagerness in his voice set off alarm bells. I remembered the way he'd looked at me earlier, the barely concealed calculation in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Clive, but my answer is no," I said firmly. "I'm not interested in any business ventures right now." His smile faltered for a moment before he recovered. "Well, think about it, won't you? Family should help family, after all." As he walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his proposal than met the eye. The way he'd said family felt like a threat, not an endearment. Eli squeezed my hand. "You okay?" I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. "I will be. Let's go back inside. I have a feeling this night is far from over." As we re-entered the reception, I caught sight of Miriam watching us, her eyes cold and calculating. Whatever game they were playing, I was determined not to be a pawn in it. I'd fought too hard for my independence to let them drag me back now. The battle lines were drawn. It was time to show my family exactly who Rachel Whitaker had become. The wedding reception was in full swing, but I couldn't shake the unease that had settled over me. Clive's earlier proposal lingered in my mind, a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. As I made my way through the crowd, I felt a hand grip my arm. "You could have been part of this, Rachel, if only you'd stayed loyal." Miriam's voice hissed in my ear, her words laced with manipulation. I turned to face her, keeping my voice low. "Loyal to what, Mother? Your constant criticism? Your blatant favoritism?" Her eyes narrowed. "Family, Rachel. Loyalty to family. Something you seem to have forgotten." Before I could respond, Clive appeared at my side, his charm turned up to 11. "Rachel, I've been looking for you. I was hoping we could discuss that business proposition in more detail." I glanced between Clive and Miriam, noting the subtle nod my mother gave him. Something was definitely off. "Clive, I appreciate your interest, but as I said before, I'm not looking for any new ventures right now," I replied firmly. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "I think you'll want to hear me out, Rachel. It could be mutually beneficial." The implication in his tone sent a chill down my spine. I stepped back, creating some distance. "What exactly are you proposing, Clive?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Your tech firm has some impressive government contracts. Contracts that could open doors for other ventures." Realization dawned. "You want access to my company's connections? For what?" Clive shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "Let's just say there are certain medical advancements that could use a fast track through regulatory approval." I felt my anger rising. "So, that's what this is about. You want to use my company to push through questionable medical treatments." Now, Rachel," Miriam interjected, her voice sickly sweet. "Don't be so dramatic. Clive is offering you a chance to help your family. Isn't that what you've always wanted? To be useful?" The old hurt flared, but I pushed it down. "I'm not interested in being useful if it means compromising my ethics or my company's reputation." Clive's facade cracked slightly. "Think carefully about this, Rachel. Family should help family after all. It would be a shame if certain information about your past came to light." The threat hung in the air between us. I felt a surge of protective anger, not just for myself, but for everything I'd built. "Are you threatening me, Clive?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. He backpedaled slightly. "Of course not. I'm simply pointing out the benefits of cooperation." I stood my ground, meeting his gaze. "Let me be very clear. I will not be blackmailed or manipulated into anything. My past is just that, past. And my present and future are my own." Miriam stepped closer, her voice low and venomous. "You ungrateful child. After everything we've done for you, everything you've done?" I cut her off, years of pent-up frustration boiling over. "You mean the constant criticism? The emotional manipulation? The way you pitted Daphne and me against each other our entire lives?" I saw heads turning in our direction, but I couldn't stop now. "I built my life and my success in spite of you, not because of you. And I won't let you, or anyone else, threaten that." Clive's smile had vanished entirely now. "You're making a mistake, Rachel. You have no idea what you're turning down." "No, Clive," I replied, my voice steady. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. I'm not the scared little girl you can push around anymore. Try to come after me or my company, and you'll regret it." With that, I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving them stunned in my wake. As I made my way back to Eli, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in years, I felt truly free from my family's shadow. Eli met me halfway, concern etched on his face. "Everything okay?" I took a deep breath, then smiled. "You know what? I think it finally is." As we left the reception, I knew this was far from over. But for the first time, I felt ready to face whatever came next, on my own terms. The wedding reception was winding down, but the tension in the air remained palpable. I found myself in a quiet corner of the venue, trying to gather my thoughts when Daphne approached, her wedding gown rustling softly. "You were always the smart one, Rachel. Why didn't you help us when we needed you?" Daphne's voice was a mix of accusation and desperation, catching me off guard. I turned to face her, confusion etched on my face. "What are you talking about, Daphne? What help?" She let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, don't play dumb. It doesn't suit you. You must have known about our financial troubles. Mom's been trying to reach out to you for months." The pieces started to fall into place. Clive's insistent business proposal, Miriam's manipulative words. "I had no idea," I said honestly. "No one told me anything." Daphne's facade cracked, revealing a vulnerability I hadn't seen in years. "We're drowning, Rachel. Mom's medical bills, Dad's failed investments. This wedding? It's all smoke and mirrors." I felt a twinge of guilt, quickly followed by anger. "And what? You thought you'd guilt me into bailing you out at my own sister's wedding?" "We didn't know what else to do," Daphne exclaimed, her voice rising. "You're the one with the successful company, the perfect life. We hoped, that I'd swoop in and save the day." I finished for her. After years of being treated like I was nothing? Daphne's eyes flashed with a mixture of shame and resentment. "You abandoned us, Rachel. You left and never looked back." I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside me. "I left because I had to, Daphne. To survive. To build something for myself. And now you won't even help your own family," she spat. "You can't guilt me into this," I said firmly. "Whatever financial mess you're in, it's not my responsibility to fix it." Daphne's desperation turned to anger. "So that's it? You're just going to turn your back on us again?" Before I could respond, Clive appeared, his arms snaking around Daphne's waist. "Everything all right here, ladies?" he asked, his tone falsely cheerful. I saw the way Daphne leaned into him, the relief in her eyes at his presence. It hit me then, Daphne wasn't just financially dependent on this marriage. She was emotionally invested in a way I hadn't realized. "Clive," I said carefully, "I think we need to have an honest conversation about your business proposal." His eyes narrowed slightly. "I thought you weren't interested." "I'm interested in the truth," I replied. "About why you're really so keen on partnering with my company." Clive's charm faltered for a moment. "I told you, it's a mutually beneficial arrangement." "Is it?" I challenged. "Or is it a desperate attempt to save yourself from financial ruin?" Daphne gasped, looking between Clive and me. "What is she talking about?" I saw the panic in Clive's eyes, the way he tightened his grip on Daphne. "It's nothing, darling. Just business talk." But Daphne wasn't buying it. "No, tell me the truth. What's going on?" As I watched the scene unfold, I felt a strange mix of vindication and sadness. The perfect facade of Daphne's life was crumbling before my eyes, just as mine had years ago. "I think," I said quietly, "that we all need to sit down and have a very honest conversation about what's really going on here." Clive's face hardened. "You have no idea what you're getting into, Rachel." "No," I replied, standing my ground. "I think for the first time, I'm seeing things clearly. And it's time for the truth to come out." As we stood there, the three of us locked in a tense standoff, I realized that this wedding had become more than just a family reunion. It was a reckoning with my past, with the lies we'd all been living, and with the hard truths we'd been avoiding for far too long. The real battle was just beginning, and I was determined to face it head-on, no matter the cost. The tension in the room was palpable as Miriam and Daphne joined Clive and me in a secluded corner of the reception hall. Eli stood by my side, his presence a comforting anchor in the storm that was about to break. "What's the meaning of this, Rachel?" Miriam hissed, her eyes darting between us. "Causing a scene at your sister's wedding? Have you no shame?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "I think it's time we all stopped pretending, Mother. The lies, the manipulation, it ends now." Daphne's face crumpled, tears threatening to spill. "Rachel, please. We can work this out." "Work what out?" I asked, my voice steady. "The fact that you've been lying about your financial situation? That you're using this wedding as a smokescreen for your desperation?" Clive stepped forward, his charm replaced by barely concealed panic. Now, let's not get carried away. Family matters are complicated. Save it, Clive. I cut him off. I know about your attempts to use my company for your own gain. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out? Miriam's eyes flashed with anger. How dare you speak to him like that? After everything we've done for you. Done for me. I laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. You mean the years of emotional abuse? The constant comparisons to Daphne? The way you made me feel like I was never good enough? The words hung in the air, heavy with years of unspoken pain. I saw shock register on the faces of nearby guests who had stopped to listen. I won't be your scapegoat anymore, I declared, my voice steady and resolute. I've built my life without you. I've succeeded despite your best efforts to tear me down. Daphne's tears were flowing freely now. Rachel, please. We're family. We need you. I felt a twinge of sympathy, but I pushed it aside. Family doesn't manipulate each other, Daphne. Family doesn't try to exploit each other's success. Clive's facade finally cracked. You have no idea what you're doing, Rachel. The connections your company has. The doors it could open for us. For you, you mean? I corrected him. Did you even tell Daphne about your plans? Or was she just another pawn in your game? Daphne turned to Clive, confusion and hurt etched on her face. What is she talking about, Clive? I watched as the realization dawned on her, the perfect image of her fiancé shattering before her eyes. Miriam, ever the manipulator, tried one last time. Rachel, darling, surely we can come to some arrangement. For the sake of family. No, I said firmly. I'm done being manipulated. I'm done feeling guilty for my success. I've worked hard for everything I have, and I won't let you take that away from me. I turned to address the onlookers, my voice carrying across the room. For years, I've let my family's version of events define me. I've let their lies and manipulations shape how others see me. But not anymore. I felt Eli squeeze my hand, giving me strength. I am Rachel Whitaker. I built a successful company from the ground up. I have a loving husband and a beautiful son. And I did it all without the support of the people who should have been there for me from the beginning. The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging in the air. I saw a mix of emotions on the faces around me. Shock, admiration, and in some cases, understanding. Miriam's face had gone pale, her carefully constructed image crumbling before her eyes. Daphne looked lost, torn between her loyalty to our mother and the harsh truths she'd just learned. As for Clive, he stood there, his plans in tatters, the mask of charm completely gone. I took Eli's hand, ready to walk away. This wedding isn't about celebration. It's about lies and desperation. And I won't be a part of it anymore. As we turned to leave, I heard Daphne's broken whisper, Rachel, wait. But I kept walking. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free. The power had shifted and I was finally in control of my own narrative. The battle wasn't over, I knew that. But as Eli and I stepped out into the cool night air, I felt stronger than ever before. Whatever came next, I was ready to face it head-on. The aftermath of my public confrontation with my family hung heavy in the air as Eli and I made our way to the hotel lobby. We were ready to leave this nightmare behind us when Miriam's voice cut through the silence. You think you can just erase us from your life? Family isn't that simple, she warned, her voice a mix of anger and desperation. I turned to face her, Eli's hand firmly in mine. I'm not erasing anyone, Mother. I'm protecting myself and my family from your toxicity. Clive stepped forward, his facade of charm completely gone. You have no idea what you're doing, Rachel. The connections your company has. They could save us all. Save you from what exactly? I challenged, my patience wearing thin. Clive's eyes darted nervously around the lobby before he leaned in, lowering his voice. I'm in trouble, Rachel. Deep trouble. There are people, powerful people, who are very interested in the kind of access your company could provide. The pieces suddenly fell into place. You're not just after business connections, are you? This is about something illegal. Daphne gasped, her eyes wide with shock. Clive, what is she talking about? Clive's composure cracked entirely. It's not what you think, Daphne. I was trying to protect us, to secure our future. By using my sister's company for what? Money laundering? Insider trading? Daphne's voice rose with each accusation. I felt a mix of vindication and pity watching my sister's perfect world crumble around her. But there was no time to dwell on it as Clive made one last desperate attempt. Rachel, please, he begged. If you just sign off on a few deals, use your influence to push through some approvals. I can make it worth your while. We all win. I stood my ground, my voice steady and firm. No, Clive. I won't compromise my integrity or my company's reputation to save you from your own bad decisions. Miriam, ever the manipulator, tried a different approach. Rachel, darling, think of your sister. Think of your family. We need you. Family? I laughed bitterly. You've never treated me like family. You've only ever seen me as a means to an end. Daphne, tears streaming down her face, stepped towards me. Rachel, please. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know about any of this. For a moment, I saw a glimmer of the sister I once knew, vulnerable, scared, and lost. But I couldn't let that sway me. I'm sorry, Daphne, I said softly, but I can't fix this for you. You need to stand on your own 2 feet. Clive, seeing his plans unravel, made one last desperate move. He grabbed my arm, his eyes wild with panic. You don't understand what's at stake here, Rachel. If I don't deliver, there will be consequences. For all of us. Eli stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. Take your hands off my wife.
Now.
The tension in the lobby was electric. Hotel staff and lingering wedding guests watched the scene unfold with a mix of shock and morbid fascination. I wrenched my arm free from Clive's grasp. Whatever mess you're in, Clive, it's your problem. Not mine. Not anymore. Miriam, realizing she was losing control of the situation, made one final plea. Rachel, you can't just walk away. We're blood. We're family. I looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years. I saw the desperation, the fear, and beneath it all, the woman who had never truly known how to love me. Blood doesn't make a family, Mother, I said, my voice steady. Love, support, and respect do. And you've never given me any of those things. With those words, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The choice between my past and my future had never been clearer. Goodbye, Mother. Goodbye, Daphne, I said, turning to leave. I hope you find a way out of this mess. But it won't be through me. As Eli and I walked out of the hotel, leaving the chaos behind, I knew this wasn't truly the end. The repercussions of this night would echo for years to come. But for the first time in my life, I felt truly free. Whatever came next, I was ready to face it, on my own terms. The days following Daphne's disastrous wedding were a whirlwind of emotions and revelations. I found myself in my office, staring out the window at the city skyline, when my assistant announced an unexpected visitor.
Daphne.
As she walked in, I barely recognized the woman before me. Gone was the polished facade, replaced by a disheveled, broken version of my sister. Rachel, she began, her voice trembling, I don't know where else to go. I gestured for her to sit, my guard still up. What happened, Daphne? She collapsed into the chair, tears welling in her eyes. Everything's fallen apart. Clive.
He's gone.
Disappeared. The police were at our house this morning, asking questions about financial fraud and insider trading. I felt a mix of vindication and pity. I'm sorry, Daphne, but I warned you about him. Her eyes flashed with a familiar anger. You knew? You knew, and you didn't tell me. Would you have believed me if I had? I countered, keeping my voice steady. Daphne deflated, the fight leaving her. No, I suppose not. I was too blinded by everything. We sat in silence for a moment, years of resentment and rivalry hanging between us. You may have tried to break me, but I found strength in your rejection. I finally said, my voice filled with newfound confidence. All those years of being compared to you, of never being good enough for Mother, They made me who I am today. Daphne looked up, surprise etched on her face. I never wanted to break you, Rachel. I was jealous. You were always so strong, so independent. I felt like I could never measure up. The irony of her words wasn't lost on me. And I spent years thinking the same about you. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. What a pair we make. Just then, my office door burst open, revealing a furious Miriam. There you are, she spat, glaring at Daphne. Do you have any idea what you've done? The scandal, the shame you've brought on this family? I stood, placing myself between Miriam and Daphne. That's enough, Mother. Miriam's eyes widened in shock. You're defending her? After everything? I'm not defending anyone, I said calmly. I'm putting an end to this toxic cycle. Miriam's face contorted with rage. How dare you? After all we've sacrificed for you girls, Sacrificed. I cut her off, my voice sharp. You mean the years of manipulation? The constant criticism? The way you pitted us against each other? Daphne stood, her voice small but steady. She's right, Mother. This has to stop. Miriam looked between us, realization dawning that she was losing control. You ungrateful children. You have no idea what I've done to protect this family. Protect us? I laughed bitterly. You've done nothing but tear us apart. The tension in the room was palpable. Miriam, seeing her influence slipping away, made one last desperate attempt. Rachel, darling, surely you can see reason. Your sister needs you now. We need you. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I knew I had to do. No, Mother. What Daphne needs is to stand on her own 2 feet. And what you need is to face the consequences of your actions. Daphne gasped, torn between her ingrained loyalty to our mother and the harsh truth of my words. I've built my life, my success, despite your best efforts to hold me back. I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. I won't let you drag me down now. Miriam's face paled, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. You can't just abandon your family, Rachel. We're all you have. I shook my head, a sense of peace washing over me. No, Mother. You're not all I have. I have a loving husband, a beautiful son, and a life I've built on my own terms. And it's time for me to focus on that. As if on cue, Eli appeared in the doorway, concern etched on his face. Seeing the scene before him, he quickly moved to my side, his presence a silent support. Miriam looked between us, defeat finally settling in her eyes. Without another word, she turned and left, the click of her heels echoing in the silence she left behind. Daphne stood there, lost and uncertain. What happens now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I turned to her, feeling a mix of empathy and resolve. Now, Daphne, you have a choice. You can keep living in Mother's shadow, or you can find your own path. But whatever you choose, it has to be your decision. As Daphne nodded, tears streaming down her face, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, I felt truly free from my family's influence. Whatever came next, I was ready to face it head-on, with Eli by my side and the strength I'd found within myself. As the dust settled from the tumultuous events of the past few weeks, I found myself standing in the backyard of our home, watching Eli and Caleb play catch. The sound of their laughter filled the air, a stark contrast to the tension and drama that had consumed my life recently. Eli caught my eye and jogged over, leaving Caleb to practice his throws. You okay? He asked, wrapping an arm around my waist. I leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his support. I'm getting there, I replied honestly. Let's focus on the family we've built, Rachel. That's what truly matters, Eli reassured me, his voice steady and comforting. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a news alert. I hesitated before opening it, already guessing what it might be about. The headline confirmed my suspicions. Tech mogul's sister's engagement ends in scandal, financial fraud uncovered. Eli peered at the screen. Are you going to read it? I paused, then shook my head. No, I don't think I will. Just then, Caleb ran up to us, his face flushed with excitement. Mom, Dad, look. I can throw the ball really far now. We turned our attention to our son, watching as he demonstrated his newfound skill. Pride swelled in my chest, not just for his athletic achievement, but for the resilience he'd shown throughout his recent health struggles. That's amazing, buddy. I cheered, pushing thoughts of Daphne and Miriam to the back of my mind. As the day wore on, we received a call from Caleb's doctor. The latest test results had come back, showing significant improvement in his condition. The news felt like a weight lifting off our shoulders, a reminder of what truly mattered in life. That evening, as we sat around the dinner table, I looked at the faces of my husband and son. This was my family now, not the toxic relationships of my past, but the loving, supportive unit we'd built together. "I've been thinking," I said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Maybe it's time we took that vacation we've been talking about. Just the three of us." Eli's face lit up. "I think that's a great idea. What do you say, Caleb? Ready for an adventure?" Our son's enthusiastic response filled the room with laughter and excitement as we began to plan our trip. Later that night, as Eli and I prepared for bed, he turned to me with a serious expression. "You know, Rachel, I'm really proud of you. The way you've handled everything, you're incredible." I felt a lump form in my throat. "I couldn't have done it without you," I replied, squeezing his hand. As we lay in bed, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. The pain of my childhood, the struggles to break free from my family's toxic influence, the challenges of building my own life and career, it had all led me here, to this moment of peace and contentment. I thought about Daphne and Miriam, wondering briefly about their fate. But I realized that their choices and consequences were no longer my burden to bear. I had my own path to follow, my own family to nurture. In the quiet of the night, I made a silent promise to myself to always cherish the family we'd created, to continue growing and thriving, and to never let the shadows of the past dim the brightness of our future. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. The chapter of my life dominated by my birth family's drama was finally ending, but a new one, filled with hope, love, and endless possibilities, was just beginning. Tomorrow, we would start planning our vacation. Tomorrow, we would continue building our life together. Tomorrow, and all the days after, would be ours to shape as we saw fit. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I looked forward to the future without fear or reservation. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew we would face them together, as a family bound not by blood, but by love, respect, and unwavering support. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all.
Welcome to the Retaliation Realm channel. We hope you enjoy today's story. I focus slowly on my small home business and don't handle many household chores. That's why my mother-in-law has started making comments again. My name is Olivia, and I'm 32 years old. I design websites and work from home. I live with my husband Nathan and his mom in the house where Nathan grew up. Before I got married, I had a job at a company, but after getting married, I decided to work for myself as a web designer from home. Most of my work comes from people who know me from my old job. They liked my work, so they kept giving me projects. It's a good deal for both of us. I don't have to spend time commuting, and I can focus on my household responsibilities. My old boss and I are both happy with how things are going. My mother-in-law doesn't like that I work from home. She thinks a wife should focus on taking care of the house and supporting her husband, like in the old days. But times have changed, and many couples both work now. My husband Nathan tries to explain this to her, but she still insists that I should do more housework since I earn the money. She doesn't understand my job and keeps calling it a home business. Even though I try to balance my work and chores, she's still not happy. Maybe she sees me as the woman who took her son away from her. Since we got married, she's been making sarcastic comments about me and seems to dislike everything I do. Nathan says she relies on him more since his dad passed away about 5 years ago. It annoys him sometimes, but he also seems to like feeling needed by his mom. Our house is in a neighborhood that Nathan's dad bought 30 years ago. His life insurance paid off the rest of the mortgage, so now it's in his mom's name. It's just right for the three of us, and there's room for me to work, which is great. My mother-in-law has lived here for 30 years and has lots of friends nearby who visit often when they come. I find myself having to pause my work to serve them tea and snacks. When they gather, they always discuss their daughters-in-law. One mentions how her daughter-in-law runs to her parents' house over trivial issues in her hard home. Another complains that her daughter-in-law spends too much money, causing problems for her son. From my workspace, I overhear these conversations and can't help but chuckle. They seem to compete over who has the worst daughter-in-law, never saying anything positive about them. When one friend praises me for managing work and household chores, my mother-in-law doesn't seem pleased. She dismisses my work as just a small business and wonders how much I make. Then another friend talks about how his wife spends her part-time job money on herself while her husband's money is for everyone. They all laugh, and my mother-in-law starts reminiscing about how things were different in her day. I tune her out with my headphones. I've heard these stories before, and they often disrespect modern wives. I focus on my work and block out the noise. One evening at dinner, Nathan casually mentioned wanting to buy a new car. I've been thinking about getting a new car. Is that okay? He asked, and my mother-in-law snapped back, wondering why he needed my permission. Nathan quickly tried to calm her down, explaining that it would be a car for all of us, so he couldn't decide on his own. Despite Nathan's explanation, my mother-in-law kept arguing with him. Since you're the only one with a driver's license, you should choose the car you want, she insisted. Poor Nathan, who usually listens to his mother, looked at me for help. You decide, he said, feeling stuck and frustrated. I told him, fine, don't keep asking for your wife's opinion. Just make the decision yourself. Nathan always checks with either me or his mother about everything. It's nice that he's considerate, but sometimes it's frustrating how unsure he can be. His dad, my father-in-law, used to make decisions on his own, and my mother-in-law often complained about it. Growing up seeing this, Nathan thinks it's wrong to be too assertive. But my mother-in-law, who had a controlling husband, believes that's how a husband should be. My mother-in-law's dissatisfaction with Nathan always seeking approval falls on me. She blames me, saying, Olivia is always nagging Nathan, that's why he's like this. I was surprised and didn't know how to respond. Nathan chimed in, blaming me too, saying, yeah, Olivia is always complaining, that's why I can't decide on my own. I tried to defend myself, but it didn't help. Nathan always takes his mother's side. We've been married for 2 years, but he's never stood up for me in front of her. He apologized later, saying I'm the most important to him, but I'm losing trust. He seemed caring at first, but he never backed me up. I'm starting to question our relationship. Kindness and indecisiveness are different. I wish he'd stand up to his mother. About a month later, Nathan's new car arrived. The smell of a new car is the best. Let's all go for a drive on my next day off, he said happily. His excitement even spread to my mother-in-law. She commented on the car's cost, hinting it was paid for from Nathan's salary. Ignoring her, Nathan enjoyed exploring the car. I was shocked at its expense. Even though I said he could choose, I thought there was a limit. When Nathan came inside still thrilled, I asked, how much did it cost? He casually replied, $60,000. Seeing my reaction, he asked, but you said I could get any car, right? My mother-in-law quickly sided with my husband, saying, you let Nathan decide, so don't complain now. While I did leave the decision to him, I also hoped he would consider our finances. Ignoring her, I asked my husband, where's the money coming from? He hesitated, then admitted he was paying with a loan. Instead of addressing this, my mother-in-law shouted, Olivia, don't complain, you're not the one paying. I wasn't sure if she was mad because I ignored her or because of what I said to my husband, but she gave me a fierce glare. You're always complaining, even though you're living off Nathan's salary, she said harshly. I defended myself, saying, I have a job too, but my mother-in-law dismissed it, saying I didn't earn much compared to Nathan's $5,000 a month. I was about to explain that the $5,000 was my salary, but when I looked for my husband, he had disappeared. I couldn't take it anymore. My mother-in-law even went as far as saying she wanted a daughter-in-law like me to leave soon. I had been patient, but I was done. Discussing my salary seemed ridiculous, and I didn't care anymore. Feeling frustrated with my mother-in-law's comments and my husband's attitude, I couldn't understand why he caused this argument in the first place. "Okay, I'll leave then," I said, heading to my home office. I grabbed my laptop and essentials and left the house, telling my mother-in-law I'd come back for the rest of my things later. She glared at me with a frightening expression, while my husband stayed in his room. As I left, my still angry mother-in-law shouted, "Make sure you've signed the divorce papers next time you come here." Did you hear me? It shocked me to hear her use such harsh language for the first time. Ignoring her, I stormed out of my in-laws' house. I wasn't sure if she was angry because I said I would leave as she asked, or because I confronted my husband about the money. Regardless, I knew I wanted to leave that house as soon as possible. After storming out of my husband's parents' house, I went back to my own parents' house for the time being. My mom was surprised and asked what happened. Suddenly, my dad, seeing my unusual expression, seemed to understand the situation. "I don't know what happened, but you can stay here as long as you need to," he assured me. I didn't hear from my husband afterward. The man who used to cherish me before our marriage was nowhere to be found. I couldn't help but feel foolish for not seeing that he only listened to his mother. Talking to my parents about what happened at my husband's house helped calm me down. "You don't have children, so it's better to divorce sooner rather than later," my mom advised, and I agreed. On the weekend, my father helped me move my belongings out of my husband's house. My husband was nowhere to be found, and my mother-in-law stayed in her room. Standing outside my husband's room, I called out, "Thank you for everything. Could you sign the divorce papers?" I slid the papers under the door. "Is this okay?" came my husband's curt voice from behind the door, along with the signed papers. It saddened me that our marriage had come to this. Without saying anything to my mother-in-law, I left my husband's house after living there for about 2 years, but there weren't many good memories. I headed straight to City Hall and submitted the divorce papers. I wanted to settle everything quickly if possible. After the divorce, I stayed at my parents' house and continued working there. I thought about renting a room and living alone, but my mom insisted I stay with them for safety reasons. My dad agreed, worried about Nathan and his mom possibly causing trouble, though I didn't think they would. I felt more comfortable being with my parents. Luckily, I could work from anywhere, so I decided to stay home for a while. About 2 months passed, and I had almost forgotten about my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law when I started getting calls from an unknown number. At first, I thought it might be the wrong number, so I didn't answer, but the calls kept coming. Reluctantly, I listened to my ex-husband's voice on the phone. "Why didn't you answer sooner?" he sounded flustered. "It's an unknown number, and besides, we're not connected anymore, so I was going to hang up," I replied, ready to end the call. But then he rushed to say, wait. I can't get my smartphone to work." "Why is that?" he sounded desperate. "I'm not sure." "You should contact your phone company," I suggested, unsure why he was calling me for technical support. I suggested, and then something dawned on me. "Did you not deposit money into your bank account when we were married?" "I used to deposit money from my salary for utilities." His salary went into the same account, but it was usually a small amount. He sold health food products, but his income was low because of the commission system. Some people make good money with lots of orders, but he didn't do as well. He mostly received the basic salary, so only a few hundred went into the account. I had been depositing money into the payment account every month, but for the past 3 months, it was only his salary. The argument about the car and me leaving the house happened in the middle of the month. That meant the payment for the new car might have already started. My ex-husband fell silent on the other end of the phone. "I've been managing everything with my salary. From now on, you'll have to figure it out on your own," I informed him. I wanted to say more, but I held back and hung up the phone. My ex-husband probably never told his mother how much he earned. She didn't realize that most of our expenses were covered by my salary since our marriage. Nathan must have felt embarrassed to admit he earned less than his wife. I later learned that utilities like electricity and water are not easily shut off. The first thing to go is usually cell phone service. A few days later, on a quiet weekend morning, the doorbell at my house rang loudly. My dad answered and started arguing with someone at the front door. Seeing my usually calm father so angry, I knew something was wrong. My mom and I went to see what was happening. "We have nothing to do with you anymore, so leave," my dad said firmly. My heart raced when I heard my ex-mother-in-law's voice demanding to see me. Just as my dad had predicted, she had come to our home. When she saw me, my ex-mother-in-law started yelling at me with a terrifying expression on her face. "Because you stopped depositing money into the account, the electricity and water got cut off," she accused. My parents and I were shocked. What did she mean by that? Just then, my ex-husband arrived, desperately trying to intervene. "Mom, stop it. This has nothing to do with Olivia," he pleaded. But my ex-mother-in-law ignored Nathan's attempts and kept yelling, "Nathan makes $5,000. Why would the electricity and water get cut off?" "You're mistaken. I'm the one who makes $5,000, I corrected her, finally able to speak up about what I hadn't been able to before. My ex-mother-in-law looked surprised at my words, then turned to Nathan. "That's right. It wasn't my salary, it was all Olivia's," he admitted, looking defeated. "How can you earn so much with a part-time job?" My ex-mother-in-law looked at me as if I had tricked her. "I've told you before, it's not a part-time job, it's a real job," I replied firmly. My ex-mother-in-law's face paled. "How much does Nathan make?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "About $500 net," he answered quietly. There was a moment of silence. Then my ex-mother-in-law said something unbelievable. "Olivia, can't you come back? The whole thing was a joke." She pleaded, her tone low and submissive, reminding me of someone trying to butter me up. "What are you talking about? I'm divorced. I have nothing to do with you two anymore," I declined firmly. But my ex-mother-in-law continued to plead with me in an overly familiar way. "You can just remarry Nathan. If we start the paperwork now, it'll be fine," she insisted. My dad intervened when I was too shocked to respond. "We're done with you. If you don't leave right now, we'll call the police," he warned, his voice firm. My ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law hurriedly left at the sound of my dad's intimidating tone. "If you show up again, I'm calling the cops right away," my father warned them as they left. "What a bunch of uncalled-for people," my mother remarked, astonished. My father seemed even more furious. "I'm glad you got out of that marriage, Olivia." Later on, I heard updates about my ex-family from one of Nathan's friends. Nathan ended up selling his family home and land, and moving into an apartment with his mother. He sold the new car too, using the proceeds to pay off remaining debts. However, instead of settling down, Nathan wasted all his money on gambling. He vanished without a trace, leaving his mother behind, who developed dementia and had to be placed in a care facility. Meanwhile, I focused on my job and started living alone. Recently, I've begun dating a man I met through work. He's understanding about my divorce and is committed to his job. He's nothing like Nathan, who relied on his wife's money for expensive purchases. Though we're not engaged yet, we both feel a strong connection and can see a future together. Thank you for being with us and listening until the end. If you found it interesting, please subscribe, give us a like, and leave your comments. We'll see you on the Retaliation Realm channel.
I had this sudden realization about how unfortunate my sister is. I came up with the perfect idea, and all you have to do is watch closely. Jennifer, wearing an extravagant wedding gown, just like one a bride would wear, lightly gestured towards the event's half for a microphone. When she got it, she turned to the gathered guests and confidently announced, "Would anyone like to take my sister off our hands? She's not highly educated, and she's getting older, isn't she?" After saying this, she shot me a smug, mean-spirited smile, completely unaware of how inappropriate her words were. The atmosphere in the room shifted dramatically. I could hear murmurs spreading, and some guests started giving Jennifer cold glares. But she, blissfully ignorant, tightened her grip on the microphone and continued, "Come on, sister. You need to sell yourself better. There are plenty of handsome doctors here. You really don't get what you've just done, do you?" Just then, an unexpected incident occurred. My name is Rachel Scott. I'm a plain 28-year-old working adult, with no particularly outstanding features, except for one unusual fact. After finishing middle school, I chose to pursue a career in law and eventually earned my attorney's license. I have a sister named Jennifer, who is 2 years younger than me. She's charming and sociable, so our family has always treated her like a favorite. In contrast, I'm just average-looking and blend into the background. I never felt special or cherished by my family or relatives. I often received cold treatment at home, unable to compete with Jennifer's natural charm, which captured all of our parents' attention and love. Meanwhile, I was met with harsh looks and indifference. I worked diligently in my studies, striving to earn good grades in hopes of attracting even a bit of attention from my family. But no matter how hard I tried, I could never outshine her. Eventually, I grew tired of competing for my family's love. I decided to take a different path, one where I would give up on seeking their affection. Instead, I poured my energy into my studies, promising myself that I would find my own worth. As I deepened my knowledge, I found confidence in my abilities, and my efforts paid off with visible results. I held on to the hope that my academic success would someday earn me praise from my parents. I continued to sit at my desk late into the night, studying and working hard. Throughout middle school, I consistently held the top spot in my class, outperforming my peers in every test. Despite my accomplishments, I never once heard words of praise from my parents. Instead, I often faced what felt like criticism for my grades. It's not enough just to be at the top. You need to get nearly perfect scores in every subject. Yes, even a 95% in science isn't good enough. They'd say things like, "This recent exam was really hard," only to follow up with, "Excuses, excuses. Your lack of effort is why your results are disappointing." My mother's voice was sharp like ice, cutting through my confidence. "Are you really planning to show off those less-than-perfect grades?" All I could do was murmur an apology. "Yes, I'm sorry." No matter how much time and effort I invested, my results never met my parents' expectations of perfection. They never acknowledged my hard work. Any score below 100% was just a reason for reprimand. But more hurtful than my parents' coldness were Jennifer's seemingly innocent words. "Oh, sister, you're not getting lectured again, are you?" She'd enter my space without knocking and smirk at my report card. "Good grades and still scolded? That's sad. I get praised for barely passing." "Did you come here just to say that?" I asked, feeling the sting of her words. I was worried maybe you were down again, but I didn't expect such a cold reception. Jennifer feigned concern as she spoke. "If you were really worried about me, you wouldn't say things like that." Her words cut deep. "That's your problem. You're always so distant. That's why Mom and Dad don't show you any love." Her gaze was as cold as ice, filled with unmistakable contempt as she looked down at me. For a brief moment, I could feel that attitude radiating from her even as she walked away. After she left, I could hear her cheerful laughter mingling with our parents' voices in the living room. I should have been used to this by now, but suddenly a wave of sadness washed over me, and I couldn't hold back the tears streaming down my cheeks. I had told myself countless times that I didn't need my parents' expectations, that I wouldn't let Jennifer's words affect me. Yet, despite my resolve, my emotions betrayed me, and tears fell freely. In my hand, I clutched my report card, now crumpled and unrecognizable from being tightly clenched. I made a vow to myself once again. I would stand on my own and break free from this suffocating family. I was determined to excel in my studies and improve my skills as a way to escape. From that moment on, I threw myself into my studies with even more enthusiasm than before. One day, as the autumn breeze swept through the classroom windows, I received an unexpected announcement from my father. "Rachel, you will not continue to high school. Instead, you need to start looking for a job," he said flatly. I was at a loss for words, my confusion overwhelming me. "Why would you say something like that?" I asked, trying to keep my face expressionless. My father responded coldly, "Further investment in you isn't necessary. If you want to go to high school, pay for it with your own earnings. If that's not possible, then you must give up. But I'm still in middle school. Work opportunities are limited for me. How am I supposed to find a job?" My protests fell on deaf ears. "You need to accept this decision. After discussing it with your mother, we've decided to focus our finances on Jennifer. We can't afford to spend any more on you," he declared firmly. Internally, I screamed, "That's not fair." But my father's decision was unyielding. His abrupt words drained all the color from my world, painting everything in shades of gray. My mother and sister watched me with smug smiles that revealed their hidden glee as I stood frozen in shock. I understand much more now than I did back then. For example, I later learned there were options to cover high school expenses, like schools that offered tuition waivers or scholarships. But back then, I didn't know how to access that information, and I was devastated at losing my chance for further education. Since that day, my passion for learning faded rapidly. The praises from my homeroom teacher, who had always admired my grades, felt hollow. The lack of tension regarding education at home made the idea of advancing to higher education seem even more hopeless. Eventually, I stepped into the next phase of my life by working at a local factory right after graduation. At that time, I wasn't yet old enough to live on my own and support myself. So, until I turned 18, I worked as hard as I could. Most of my salary went to the household, and the small amount I kept for myself was saved for the future. Those tough days felt like crawling through an endless tunnel. On my 18th birthday, I finally left that house, leaving behind a letter for my family. With my decision firmly in my heart, I walked away from a home that now existed only in my memories. Ironically, my family's reaction was as if I had never existed. There was complete silence, no phone calls, no letters. At first, living apart from my family filled me with heartbreak, and loneliness cast a shadow over my days. However, as time passed, that loneliness gradually eased with the busyness of work. After moving out and starting an independent life, the stress I had felt at home began to fade away. I started to experience a mental spaciousness I had never known before. This newfound peace reignited a spark of enthusiasm within me. I regained my former passion for learning and decided to start studying again after a long hiatus. I began with the basics, reviewing them carefully. The joy of learning filled my heart once more, and before I knew it, I was immersed in my studies. After that, I started to explore high school textbooks and began reading extensively. During this reading journey, I discovered books about law, which sparked a deep interest in the legal profession. With my education ending in junior high, the idea of becoming a lawyer felt far-fetched. However, I unexpectedly learned about the preliminary examination system. This system offered a chance for someone with my educational background to take the bar exam. Armed with this new knowledge, my dedication to studying grew stronger. I seized every moment at home and, even during short breaks, at work to memorize legal terms. During lunch, I would eat while ensuring that my preparation for the bar exam never faltered. The factory where I worked was filled with people from the generation above me, most around my parents' age. They noticed my earnest efforts and united to support me. Then, at 23, I managed to pass the exam. After passing, I left my long-term job at the factory and secured a position at a prestigious law firm. After about 4 years of training there, I ventured out to open my own law practice. Now, I spend my days contentedly serving as a legal consultant for a hospital. Yet sometimes, I ponder what would happen if I told my parents about my journey to becoming a lawyer. I wonder how they would react. Occasionally, I hold on to the hope that I might finally meet the expectations they might have had for me. Nevertheless, I haven't shared any of this with them, and deep down, I believe I will continue to keep my distance. However, an unexpected reunion with my family came sooner than I thought. One evening, after finishing work, I came home to find a message on my smartphone from Jennifer, my younger sister. It said she was getting married. Jennifer is getting married, I whispered softly to myself. My sister, now 26, was engaged to a doctor, and her wedding was scheduled for next month. They wanted me to attend. Even after the long period of estrangement from Jennifer and my parents, I hesitated to meet them. But as a family member, I couldn't ignore this important event, so I sent a reply saying I would attend. Jennifer quickly responded with the details of the ceremony, including the exact date and location. The message ended with a note reminding me not to forget the wedding gift, which made me smile a little. It seemed that rather than welcoming me wholeheartedly, Jennifer was expecting a wedding gift. I decided to use the wedding as a chance to reconnect with the family and then part ways again. On the day of Jennifer's wedding, I carefully picked out a blue dress and headed to the venue for the ceremony. After completing the entrance formalities, I took my seat in the family section, where my father and mother were already sitting. You have some nerve showing up here. You must be doing well for yourself with that meager salary from the factory, my father said coldly. Indeed, you're right. Introducing someone like her as family doesn't reflect well on us as parents, my mother added disdainfully. Jennifer shouldn't have invited someone like you, my father continued. I told them exactly that, but they insisted on receiving the celebration money anyway, my mother said quietly. Despite my presence, they spoke without hesitation, as if I weren't there. This was the harsh reality I faced. I had a faint hope that sharing my side of the story might help bridge the gap between my family and me, but that hope quickly shattered, leaving me feeling defeated. Both my father and mother completely avoided any conversation with me. As I sat in silence, I glanced around the venue and noticed some familiar faces among the groom's side. Haven't I seen that person somewhere before? I wondered. I found myself musing as I felt a sense of déjà vu with the person sitting next to the groom. While I traced my uncertain memory, I looked up the groom's name, and my suspicion turned into conviction. The connection I had anticipated became clear. I couldn't hide my faint surprise at such a coincidence. It felt almost like a twist of fate. However, I decided to keep my emotions in check and quietly participate in the ceremony. As the program continued, the bride and groom made a glamorous entrance, followed by their guests who shared warm words and entertaining performances that lightened the atmosphere. As time passed, the banquet shifted from dinner to photo-taking sessions. During this time, my parents got up without acknowledging my presence and moved toward the front where the bride and groom were waiting. Jennifer, drawn like a magnet, stayed close to them, beaming with happiness as each photograph was taken. I tried to ignore the scene unfolding before me and focus silently on the meal in front of me. Unexpectedly, Jennifer quietly approached me. She came closer with a smile, but her eyes sparkled with something more than just excitement about seeing her sister after so many years. It felt like she had something else in mind. Big sis, it's been such a long time, hasn't it? Are you happy to spend time together like this? She asked lightly. I nodded quietly, trying to express my true feelings. Yes, the banquet food is really wonderful, I replied. With a sarcastic smile, Jennifer continued. You can't get such luxurious food at the factory where you work, can you? You should be grateful for this opportunity. Something inside me felt like it was being torn apart, but I didn't show it on my face. However, Jennifer's words turned sharper, cutting into me like a knife. Oh, dear. Did I upset you? I'm sorry, but it's natural for you to be envious, isn't it? Your little sister is marrying a doctor after all. The phrase "I'm sorry" slipped from Jennifer's mouth flippantly, as if it were just a meaningless ornament. I kept my expression neutral and quietly waited for my next move. At that moment, Jennifer leaned in and whispered in my ear, Big sis, because I feel sorry for you, I've come up with a great idea. I looked at her suspiciously. A great idea? What is it? With a satisfied grin, Jennifer said, You'll see. Just watch closely. Dressed in her elegant wedding gown, Jennifer gathered everyone's attention as she received a microphone from the staff. Suddenly, she announced loudly to the guests, "Ladies and gentlemen, you may not know this, but my sister is here. She may not have the highest education or be the youngest, but if anyone is kind-hearted enough, could you please take her under your wing?" My face turned bright red. "What are you saying, Jennifer?" I exclaimed. But she continued even louder. "Although she doesn't earn much and lives a modest life, is there someone here who can brighten my sister's future?" As the eyes of everyone around focused on me, I saw that Jennifer seemed to be enjoying my confusion, a smug smile on her face. In that moment, a breathtaking scene unfolded. Jennifer's disrespectful attitude escalated, and astonishingly, even our usually gentle parents joined in. "Please treat her kindly," they chimed in, their frivolous comments feeling like a final blow to me. Rage swirled within me. How far would they go to ridicule me, especially on such a joyful occasion? I couldn't believe this was happening. But now it was time for me to confront the reality of the situation. As the atmosphere shifted and murmurs spread through the venue, Jennifer, blissfully unaware that she was the center of attention, cheerfully took the microphone again. "Rachel, look. There are so many doctors gathered here. It's your chance." I maintained my silence, but conveyed a strong will through my somber gaze. "This is the end for you," I thought. Confused, Jennifer could only respond with an, "Huh." I continued calmly, "You'll soon understand just how terrible your actions have been." Just as Jennifer tried to come up with an excuse, the groom suddenly raised his voice to address the crowd. "Wait, please. Why are you leaving your seats?" His voice captured everyone's attention. Looking toward the groom, I noticed that all his colleagues from work were standing up and heading for the exit. Even as the groom tried to stop them, a dignified man, who appeared to be the hospital director, spoke up with determination. The recent remarks of the bride were so unpleasant that I can hardly believe it. "I apologize, but we can no longer stay here. We will take our leave now." In response, the groom hurried to stop the hospital director. "Please wait. I admit her words were inappropriate. I'll speak to her directly and ensure she undergoes a serious change in awareness." However, the hospital director pointed out the seriousness of the situation and revealed a background the groom was unaware of. "Don't you know what kind of person your sister is?" The groom looked confused. "No, I only met her sister for the first time today. All I've heard is that she works in a factory after graduating from middle school." The hospital director couldn't hide his irritation at the groom's ignorance. "That's ridiculous. Her sister is a respected lawyer and serves as the legal advisor to our hospital." The groom's eyes widened in shock as he learned this fact. He clearly had no idea that I was the hospital's legal advisor. The room fell silent, and both Jennifer and our parents lost their words. I realized that the reason the groom looked familiar was that I had seen him several times at hospital events. The other guests likely had the same realization as they looked at me. Jennifer's inappropriate comments only added fuel to the fire, prompting the hospital director to express his outrage. Even though the groom was a member of the hospital's medical staff and had no direct relation to me, to the hospital director and other staff, the legal advisor held significant importance. The groom's face turned even redder in an instant as he stepped toward Jennifer, raising his voice in reproach. "What on earth is this? Because of your carelessness, my reputation is now tarnished." Jennifer stumbled over her words for a moment, then defended herself like a bewildered child. "It's not like that. I truly had no idea my sister was in such a prestigious position." Growing more indignant, the groom continued to scold Jennifer. "Ignorance is no excuse. How can you speak so lightly and disrespectfully about your own sister? As a human being, your behavior is at the very bottom. You've truly lost sight of what's valuable." Desperately trying to elicit some understanding, Jennifer pleaded, "Wait a minute. Listen, I have a good reason." But the groom cut her off without room for her explanation. "I'm withdrawing from the marriage. I have no interest in hearing your excuses. Our discussions about marriage end here." Jennifer looked shocked, her complexion turning deathly pale as she collapsed on the spot. In a fit of anger, the The groom disappeared from the wedding hall along with the guests. As I was about to leave, I heard my sister's desperate cry behind me. "Please help me, Rachel." But I wasn't swayed by her pleas. I confronted her with a stern tone. "Help you? Why should I do such a thing for you? The situation you find yourself in is the result of the seeds you've sown. You try to get a laugh by mocking others, and now you're playing the victim when it fails. That's a pathetic sight I cannot accept." Jennifer, fraught with confusion and anxiety, pleaded, "Why are you using such harsh words? If I had known about your success as a lawyer," I responded quietly but firmly, "why should I need to inform someone who has never contacted me about my profession? In fact, I was planning to end our relationship after this wedding. But now, having witnessed your unfortunate end, I'm somewhat satisfied. You must be disappointed that your engagement to a doctor has fallen apart. Well, you better work hard to find your next prospect." With those words, I left the venue with dignity. From a distance, I could hear the critical voices of Jennifer and our parents among the guests. Everything unfolded as expected, and Jennifer's marriage was no more. My parents, who had thought a secure future was assured through Jennifer marrying a doctor, expressed their anger towards her for the first time. The sister who had always been pampered couldn't withstand their rage and sought salvation with a broken heart. But I ignored her pleas. I never answered the phone, despite her repeated attempts to reach me, and I cut off all contact with the family. I heard that Jennifer had quit her job. Now without employment, estranged from our parents, she spent her days shut in at home. As for me, I was maintaining a very satisfying life, both in work and in my personal life. I led a peaceful existence, without any significant problems. Although my relationship with my family hadn't been smooth sailing, I was fortunate to receive a great deal of support from people in my professional life and my daily existence. This blessed environment wasn't due to chance. It was the result of long-term self-investment and persistent effort. There were days when I faced harsh trials, but overcoming each one brought me to where I am today. Reflecting on my past struggles, I recognize their value and now hope to continue living a fulfilling life at my own pace, setting realistic goals while keeping stress to a minimum.
My name is Polly. I was sitting at the top of the stairs, just out of sight. I could hear them in the kitchen, their voices all tangled up like a bunch of knotted shoelaces. Mom and Frank, the guy who swooped into our lives like some kind of low-rent Superman, minus the cape and all the good stuff. "Frank, she's my daughter," I heard Mom say, a tremble sneaking into her voice like it was trying to tiptoe around him. "Look, Sheila, I didn't sign up for this, you know? It's bad enough I gotta deal with this place being a mess and you're cooking." He grumbled so loudly I could hear his words clear as day. "Now I got my own kid on the way, and I need to think about that, not this. "Say it," Mom dared him, quieter now. "Say what you mean, Frank." He snorted. "Not this leech you got hanging on us. What is she, huh? Just a mouth to feed. Someone I got no bond with. She's just gotta go." Mom exhaled long and sorrowful, like the air itself was heavy with regret. But where would she go? I felt like my heart was a punching bag, and Frank was the kind of guy who didn't know when to stop swinging. What about her aunt? That sister of what's his name, the dead guy? Linda? But... No buts, Sheila. Geez, you're always so soft. She's family, ain't she? Let her deal with the kid. There was a quiet beep as someone pressed a number on the phone, and my ears strained to hear the rest. "Yeah, hi Linda? Frank here. Yeah, you're about to do me a solid. Got a bit of a situation." "Well, no, not a health thing. It's about the kid, Sheila's daughter." I squeezed my eyes shut, wishing I could just disappear into the worn carpet beneath me. "Yes, Polly," Frank's voice was gruff, impatient. "Look, here's the deal. She's coming to live with you." "What? Nah, don't worry about it. She's practically invisible anyway. Won't even know she's there." I heard Mom's shuffling feet, like she was pacing or fidgeting, probably wringing her hands the way she did when she was torn up about something. "Linda, it's Sheila. Yes, I know. We're in a tight spot. I can't, with the baby coming. The next voice, Aunt Linda's, cut through the line, sharp and cold like the knives she used to make her overcooked roasts. Fine. I'll take her. But I'm not running a charity here, Sheila. You better keep sending checks. I could almost see Mom wincing, even from where I sat. It stung, knowing the rest of my things in that duffel bag weren't half as important as those checks to Aunt Linda. Footsteps hammered towards the stairs, and I scampered up and into my room, heartbeat thundering so hard in my chest it nearly drowned out the sounds of the looming goodbye. Mom knocked softly, as if the force of her own hand could shatter me. Honey, she started, pushing the door open, her face all twisted in a way that let you know the I'm sorry was coming before a word left her lips. You're gonna stay with Aunt Linda for a bit. I stood there, my arms tight around that duffel bag, like it was the only thing I had left in the whole sorry world. Because, maybe, it was. With a glance back at the room that had been mine, I stepped out into the dim hallway, Mom trailing behind me like a shadow I wished I could shake. I didn't even turn to look at her as I walked out the front door. It was easier that way. Standing on the porch, Aunt Linda looked me up and down as I clutched my duffel bag, each second stretching out like hours. So you're here, Polly, she finally spoke, the words flat and hard. Hi, Aunt Linda. I managed to mutter, trying to keep my voice steady. Don't just stand there, bring your stuff in. But remember, I run a tight ship. You'll follow my rules under my roof, she said, turning on her heel and heading inside. I followed her into the house, which had the warmth of an ice cube. Rule 1, no shoes in the house. Park 'em by the door. And don't you dare drag in any dirt. I keep a clean home. I nodded, slipping off my sneakers and leaving them neatly by the entrance. Rule 2, lights out by 9 on school nights. I won't have any late night gallivanting or nonsense, she continued, ticking off her rules on her fingers as she went. Okay, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Rule 3, don't talk back. Don't question me. Just do as you're told, quick and without fuss. Her house was like a museum, everything in its place and nothing out of line. The living room looked barely lived in. Plastic covers clung to the sofas, and I'd bet my last dollar they'd never been sat on. Aunt Linda caught my gaze and snapped, those are for protection, not for sitting. God help you if I catch a crease in them. I just nodded again, trying to take it all in. A few days in and it felt like I was walking on eggshells that were rigged to explode. I spent my time trying to be invisible, hoping that'd save me from her sharp tongue. One day, I slipped up, I spilled a bit of milk on the counter. Quick as I could, I wiped it up, but not quick enough. What's this? A puddle? Aunt Linda had appeared like a whisper, and her voice was like thunder. Wasting food and making a mess. I got it, Aunt Linda. It's clean now. I showed her the rag, trying to prove it was just a small spill. You think sorry and a rag fixes everything? You think I have the time and money to waste on your clumsiness? No, I started, but she cut me off with a wave of her hand. Like I needed more problems. Your mom sends you here like I got nothing better to do, she grumbled. Even your own mom didn't want you, so why should I? Her words hit me square in the chest. I stood there, jaw tight, swallowing the hurt because crying wouldn't change a thing. I knew arguing would only make it worse. The rules were clear, and Aunt Linda was the kind who never bent them. Not for anyone. Sorry, won't happen again, was all I could get out. You're right, it won't. Because if something like this happens again, we're gonna have a bigger problem, you hear me? Loud and clear, I answered. My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. Dinner was a silent affair. Aunt Linda liked eating without the sound of anyone else's breathing, it seemed. I tried to chew quietly, making every move deliberate, wishing I could just disappear into my room already. Days bled into weeks and weeks into months, each as unremarkable as the last, until one afternoon. I was sitting on the carpet in my room, the one with the faded wallpaper peeling at the corners. My room at Aunt Linda's was just another box in the stack, nothing like my old one back at Mom's. With Aunt Linda at the grocery store, I grabbed the cordless phone from its cradle in the living room. My heart was racing as I punched in Mom's number, a sequence I still knew by heart. Years of dialing it for takeout or when there was a spider too big for me to handle alone. The phone rang and rang. On the fourth, she picked up. "Yeah? Mom, it's me, Polly," I blurted out before my courage could fail. There was a pause, a breath, a sigh. "What do you want?" I miss you, Don't." She cut in, her voice icy. "Don't ever call here again." The line clicked dead. I stood there, phone in hand, her words a new weight in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't just the rejection that stung, it was the finality of it. "I hope that was important." Aunt Linda's voice came from behind me like a winter's draft. I turned, startled, the phone slipping slightly from my grasp. "I just wanted to talk to her," I said, my voice failing to hide the quiver. She snatched the phone from my hand, her eyes narrow slits. "You think these calls are free?" I'm sorry, I'll pay for it," I stammered, though I had no idea how. Aunt Linda snorted. "Pay for it? With what? No, you've caused enough trouble. I'm done with it, done with you." Before I could plead, she was on the phone, barking into the receiver. "Yeah, Betty? Get a room ready. She's coming to you." I barely had time to process her words before I found myself holding a bus ticket and a hastily repacked duffel bag. She dumped me at the bus stop with a shake of her head and a good riddance that followed me onto the bus. I was on my way to Grandma's, and as the bus chugged along, the town I knew became a blur. I thought about Mom's voice, that tone I'd never heard before. I pressed my forehead against the cool window, the hum of the engine a stark contrast to the storm inside me. Grandma lived in a smaller town a couple of hours away, in a house that was as old but twice as cozy as Aunt Linda's. She was standing on the porch when I arrived, her eyebrows drawn down in concern. "You okay, Polly?" she asked as I trudged up the steps. I shook my head. "Aunt Linda sent me away. Mom doesn't want to talk to me anymore." Grandma sighed, opening her arms wide. I stepped into her hug like it was a safe haven. "Families can be tough," she murmured. "Come on in, I'll make you some tea." As I sank down at her kitchen table, surrounded by the comforting scent of cinnamon and apples, the warmth of the room unfreezing my fingers, I started to realize something hard. That sometimes, the idea of a parent isn't what you get. And maybe, just maybe, I had to start figuring out how to deal with that. The day I settled into Grandma's house, I could tell it was a different world. The walls were lined with pictures of plants and landscapes, unlike the museums back at Aunt Linda's place. Grandma was already in the kitchen, the heart of her home, humming a tune I didn't recognize. "Gran, you need help with anything?" I called out as I dragged my bag inside. Without missing a beat in her humming, she replied, "Nah, just park yourself at the table. Gonna fix us some grub." Her voice was raspy from years of yelling over the noise of farm machinery back when she used to run the family's apple orchard. Now, the most noise she dealt with was the creaking of the porch swing and the clatter of her old pots and pans. As the weeks passed, I fell into step with her ways. Wake up before the sun, help with breakfast, then off to school. After school, help around the house, dinner, homework, and bed. No frills, no drama. One chilly afternoon, Grandma found me on the porch swing, the horizon painted orange and pink by the setting sun. "Got something to tell ya," she said, pulling the other side of the swing down with her weight. I tightened my grip on the chains of the swing. Whatever it was, Grandma wasn't one for beating around the bush. "You're not just staying here, you know. This isn't temporary." She held out some papers to me. "I've gone and made it official. You're mine now, for good." I scanned the papers. Words like custody and guardianship jumped out at me. She'd done it. "Why'd you do this, Gran?" To me, it seemed like taking on a burden more trouble than a teenage girl was worth. "'Cause your blood, kid. More than that. You got spirit. Remember, tenderness beneath the strength. She repeated her old saying and tapped her chest. Right here is where you've gotta be toughest. We sat quiet for a while, the swing creaking under us, the sky darkening. I let her words wrap around me like the quilts on my new bed upstairs. Thanks, Gran, I finally said. That was all. Thanks. It sounded lame even to my own ears. Well, don't thank me yet. You'll be pulling extra weeds tomorrow, make no mistake. Her tone was playful, but I knew she'd hold me to it. Sitting on the swing now, a few days after my sweet 16, I could see that Grandma's house wasn't just a haven. It was a starting line. And with her backing, I was finally ready to run my race. The morning sun hadn't even cracked the sky when Grandma kicked the bottom of my bed. Rise and shine, Doc, she barked, same as she had every morning since I started med school. I groaned, my hand searching for the alarm clock. It's not even light out, Gran. World don't wait for light. Cows don't milk themselves. Patients don't cure themselves, neither. She didn't have cows to milk, of course. It was about getting a point across, like always. Afternoons at the hospital were a blur of white walls and beeping monitors. By the time I got back, evening had settled in, and the house glowed with warm light. How'd it go? Grandma was at the stove, poking at something that smelled like heaven. Good, real good. I washed my hands at the kitchen sink, watching her move around the kitchen. Dr. Klein let me lead a minor procedure. She raised her eyebrows, a spoon still in her hand dripping some sauce. Is that right? And how'd that feel? Scary as hell, I admitted. But I did it, and it went well. That's 'cause you're made of tough stuff. She plated the food and set it on the small kitchen table. Earned your stripes today, huh? Feels like it, I agreed, diving into dinner. Afterward, we sat on the porch, me with a textbook, her with her knitting. The night was quiet, the only sound the crickets and the occasional turn of a page or click of needles. Thinkin' of Ted? She asked out of the blue. Ted was the first boy I brought home, a lifetime ago it seemed. Not much time for that. I didn't even glance up from my book. Relationships took time and energy I didn't have. You make time for what's important, she countered. There's more to life than just work and study. I sighed. Maybe after my residency, Gran. She nodded, knowing that was the best I could offer right then. Just remember, life's short. I smiled at her words, thinking how many times I'd heard just that. Never forget, you got more to give than just being a good doctor. Got a heart that needs sharing too. It was in this simple way that she kept my feet on the ground, reminding me there was a world outside medicine, and one day, I'd be a part of that too. We didn't talk much after that. The night wrapped around us, a blanket of peace as I pondered a future that seemed both exciting and terrifying. As the clock ticked towards tomorrow, I knew one thing for sure, whatever the future held, I'd face it head on. Just like Grandma taught me. I should have known when Gran missed breakfast for the third day straight. It's nothing, she'd said, waving off my concern. But nothing didn't leave you pale and worn out, nothing didn't whisper lies in a voice that trembled like an old barn in a storm. The news hit like a brick. It's cancer, the doctor told me, voice flat like the EKG I wished was for someone else, anyone else. You serious? I'd asked, eyes darting from the doctor to Gran, who sat there nodding like she'd known all along. As serious as it gets, Gran said. She sat up straight, no tears, just that squared chin that always meant business. The battle was short and fierce, and through it all, she'd never let me see her scared. Until one quiet morning when she finally let go of the fight, the breath slipping from her in a soft sigh, like she was slipping into a warm bath. After, the house felt empty, like someone had scooped out the middle and left me with a shell. I walked through the funeral like someone else, shaking hands, accepting hugs, hearing murmurs of she loved you like her own. They didn't get it, not really. It wasn't like she was my own, she was my everything. After everyone had gone, I stayed back, leaning on the cool marble, staring at the casket that was too new, too shiny. Left alone, I whispered to Gran, like I used to when it was just me and her against the world. "I'll make you proud, I swear." The next morning, I found myself at the hospital, the hall sterile and smelling of disinfectant. My hands were steady, my mind clear. This was where I belonged. I might have lost Gran, but I was going to save others, keep going, just like she would have wanted. In surgery, my hands didn't shake. Gran's strength lived in me. Each stitch was a promise, a testament to her legacy, a legacy of love. Love that didn't end with last breaths or in silent funeral halls. It was the love that pushed you forward when life kicked you in the teeth. The love that made you square your shoulders and face each day knowing you were never really alone. Mom always had a flair for drama, like she could smell money from miles away and come sprinting. The doorbell rang one lazy Sunday, pulling me away from medical journals and a cup of coffee. I opened the door and there they were, like some twisted version of a family reunion photo. Mom looked at me with those hawkish eyes, and before I could even get out a hello, she was in with the ask. "You've gotta share, it's only fair. Half is ours by rights," she said, her hand fluttering around like a bird trying to get out of a cage. Stepdad just leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, a muscle ticking in his jaw. He had that look, the one he got when he knew Mom had a great idea. Sarah hung back, not saying a word, just scrolling on her phone. I couldn't help it, a laugh just bubbled up. "Oh, you? For what, exactly? Last time I checked, you kicked me out when I was 11. Mom's eyes narrowed to slits. "We put a roof over your head, fed you, clothed you. That has to be worth something." "Fed? Clothed? More like rations and hand-me-downs." I crossed my arms, mirroring Stepdad. I was not going to be bullied. "But Gran," she said, the word almost a slur, "she left you everything, and we're struggling here." Stepdad took a step forward. "Listen, just give us what we deserve and we can all walk away from this peacefully." I shook my head, a mix of anger and disbelief churning in my gut. "Gran didn't leave you a penny, 'cause she knew exactly what sort of people you are. Matter of fact, you remember that whole thing when I was a kid, about where I came from? Well, turns out Gran adopted me when I was a baby, so legally, I'm not even obligated to give you the time of day, let alone any inheritance." Mom went pale as a sheet, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "No." Sarah looked up then, her face confused. "What's she saying, Mom?" Stepdad's face transformed into a dark cloud. "She's saying we're not getting a damn thing." "That's right," I affirmed. "You won't get anything from me." "You'll regret this," Stepdad growled, a vein bulging in his neck. I stepped out, bracing myself against the frame of the door, the morning sun hot on my back. "Is that a threat?" I asked, my voice steelier than I felt. He squared his shoulders, but I wasn't 11 and scared anymore. "It's a promise." Mom grabbed his arm, giving me a look that could curdle milk. "Let's go," she hissed. I stepped back inside and closed the door, the click of the latch loud in the quiet house. Gran was gone, but she left me more than money. She left me the courage to stand up to them and the sense of worth they'd tried to take from me. Neighbors gave me the heads up with a quick call, "That sort of just thought you should know ring that meant trouble. Your mom and her lot set up camp in your grandma's old house," they said, all concerned and a bit gossip hungry. That house was mine and mine alone, Grandma made sure of that. The nerve of them, thinking they could just move in and not one soul would tell me. "Guys," I said, knocking on the door louder than necessary, "you can't just crash here. This isn't a motel." Mom yanked the door open, a fake smile plastered on her face. "Polly, we're family," she exclaimed, leaning against the doorframe like she owned the place. Stepdad loomed behind her, his look less welcoming. "We're not going anywhere. This is as much ours as it is yours," he stated with that smug smirk that made my blood heat up. I clenched my fists, feeling the weight of the keys in my pocket. "The house is mine, legally. You have one day to get out or I'm calling the cops. They laughed, the kind that grates on your nerves. Yeah, sure. Call the cops on your family. That'll look great, stepdad jeered, his arms folded across his chest. I didn't want a scene, but they left me no choice. The next morning, they were still there, lounging around as if they owned the place. That's when I made the call. When the cops rolled up, I could almost taste the sour change in the air. I stood by, arms crossed, watching through the living room window. Ma'am, sir, you need to leave the premises. Now, one officer said firmly, his hand resting near his belt. But she's my daughter, Mom tried to plead, her voice shifting to desperation. And I'm her stepdad, added stepdad, that tick in his jaw back like a storm warning. Doesn't matter. You don't own this house and the owner wants you out, the second cop chimed in, stepping forward. They'd finally stopped laughing. I could see the realization dawning on their faces, the reality that they couldn't bulldoze their way through life anymore. I didn't budge until their car was a speck in the distance, and then turned to face the empty house. It felt like taking a deep breath after being underwater too long. It was quiet, the kind of peace that comes when a storm has passed and left clear skies in its wake. Stepping into the house, the air felt different, lighter. Grandma's voice didn't echo the way it did before, now it was in my own head, words that came like a bomb, soothing over years of scars. With each step, I started to reclaim the space. The kitchen, where Grandma taught me to bake, the living room, where she healed my teenage heartaches with ice cream and tough love, and her bedroom, where she'd say prayers that I'd find my way in a world that could be cruel and unforgiving. I made coffee, the aroma filling the space, binding me to this house, this moment. Sitting at the kitchen table, I raised my cup to the new day. Justice served, and served well.
My name is Emma, and I'm 28 years old. I'm married to a kind and supportive man named Tom, and we're expecting our first baby in a few months. Right now, we live in the heart of the Kansas countryside, where the fields stretch endlessly, and the sky is always a brilliant blue. It's peaceful here, but our lives have been anything but calm. My father passed away last month after a long battle with illness. I had been his main caretaker during his final year, trying to ease his pain and keep his spirits up. I regret that I never had the chance to share the news of my pregnancy with him. The hospital visits, phone calls, and endless worry took a toll on me, but I was determined to make his last days as comfortable as possible. Our relationship with my sister, Sophia, had become strained. She's in her late 20s and lives in New York City with her husband, the CEO of a marketing company. Sophia always found it too difficult and expensive to visit, despite how much I needed her support. The distance between us wasn't just physical, it grew wider with each passing day. Her absence was a constant reminder of her disinterest, and I found myself handling our father's illness alone, feeling the weight of his condition and the burden of his care. It was hard not to resent her for not being there, for offering nothing but empty promises and excuses. The day arrived when we had to gather to discuss our father's will, and the tension in the room was palpable. Our mother, elderly and frail, sat beside me, her face a mask of quiet sadness. James, the lawyer who had handled our father's affairs for years, was present to guide us through the process. Sophia, always impeccably dressed, sat across the table, her eyes sharp and calculating. "Thank you all for coming," James began, his voice steady but sympathetic. "We're here to go over Mr. Thompson's will." Sophia's gaze was fixed on James, her impatience evident. "Can we just get to the inheritance?" "I have a meeting later," she snapped. James nodded and began reading from the will. "According to Mr. Thompson's instructions, the house and the land will be left to Mrs. Thompson." Our mother's face showed a flicker of relief. The old farmhouse, which had been our family home for decades, was finally secured for her. But then it hit: while the house was owned, the land had been rented, not purchased. The realization struck Sophia like a splash of cold water. What about the rest? Sophia asked sharply, cutting James off. James remained composed and continued. The savings and the storage shed will be divided between Emma and Sophia. Sophia's eyes narrowed, her frustration unmistakable. I want the $300,000 in savings. I'll take that, Sophia declared. I was taken aback. But that's not fair. I should get a share of the savings too. Sophia's tone was icy. It's what I deserve. You've had the house and the land, and I need that money to cover my expenses. Our mother nodded in agreement, her voice trembling. Emma, I believe you might find something valuable in the shed. It's been there for years. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had spent so much time taking care of everything, and now Sophia was claiming the lion's share of our father's savings without a second thought. It felt like an insult to all my hard work and sacrifice. As the meeting concluded, Sophia left quickly, her designer heels clicking on the wooden floor as she walked away. I was left standing in the quiet room with my mother and James, frustration boiling beneath the surface. Emma, I'm sorry, James said gently. It's not an ideal situation, but it's how the will is structured. I nodded, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on me. I'll deal with it. I just hope that shed holds something useful. I walked out of the room, my thoughts racing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The shed had always been a mystery, filled with old farming tools and forgotten items. My father had never talked much about it, and I had never thought to question its contents. The drive back to our countryside home felt long and lonely. Tom was waiting for me when I arrived, his expression full of concern. How did it go? Tom asked as I walked in. It was tense, I replied. Sophia took all the savings. I'm left with the shed. Tom frowned. I'm sorry. It's not fair. I know, I said, feeling a pang of frustration. But I have to check out the shed. Maybe there's something of value there. That evening, I stood in front of the old shed. Its wooden door was weathered and creaky, just as I remembered. Dusty, neglected, and forgotten. With a deep breath, I opened the door and stepped inside. The shed was dimly lit, and the smell of old wood and rusted metal filled the air. Tools were scattered around, covered in a thick layer of dust. As I moved deeper into the shed, I noticed a small door at the back, partially hidden behind a pile of old machinery. My curiosity got the better of me, and I pushed aside the equipment to reveal the hidden door. It was locked, but a rusty key hung on a nearby hook. My heart raced as I unlocked the door and opened it. Inside was a cramped space, and in the corner sat a large safe. My pulse quickened. Could this be what I had been hoping for? The small room was dim, but the heavy old safe stood out, its surface scratched and worn. My hands trembled as I turned the handle. The safe creaked open, revealing neatly arranged boxes and a few velvet-lined cases. I opened the first box and my eyes widened. It was filled with expensive-looking watches, several of them glimmering under the weak light of the shed. I recognized some of them. They were part of my father's collection. My heart raced as I realized their potential value. These weren't just old trinkets. They could be worth a significant amount of money. I knew I had to handle this carefully. The inheritance dispute with Sophia was far from over, and the discovery of these watches could change everything. I took photos of each watch and carefully placed them back into the safe. I needed to consult professionals to understand their value and figure out the best way to move forward. When I returned to the house, Tom was waiting anxiously. He could tell by my expression that something significant had happened. "What did you find?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "I found a safe in the shed," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's filled with watches. I think they might be worth a lot." Tom's eyes widened. "That's incredible. But what now?" "I'm going to consult a lawyer and an accountant," I replied. "We need to handle this properly. There's a lot at stake." Over the next few days, I met with James, the lawyer who had handled my father's will. I showed him the photos of the watches and explained the situation. James studied the photos carefully. "These are indeed valuable. Your father had quite an impressive collection. I'd recommend getting them appraised by a professional to determine their exact worth." I nodded, feeling a surge of hope. What about the inheritance tax and dividing the watches? James thought for a moment. Once we have an appraisal, we can figure out the tax implications. It might be best to sell some of the watches to cover those expenses and then distribute the rest according to the will. Following his advice, I hired an appraiser to evaluate the watches. When the results came in, I was stunned. The collection was worth at least $600,000, far more than I had anticipated. I felt a mix of relief and anxiety as I realized the true extent of our inheritance. The next step was handling the taxes. I consulted an accountant to make sure everything was in order. The process was complicated and stressful, but I was determined to get it right. To cover the taxes, I decided to sell a portion of the watches and set aside some money for the relatives who had supported us during this difficult time. I kept one watch, a beautiful pocket watch that had belonged to my father, for sentimental reasons. News of the gift cards I had sent to relatives soon reached Sophia. I had hoped to keep things amicable, but her reaction was anything but friendly. She called me one evening, her voice icy and demanding. "Emma, I heard about the gift cards," she said sharply. "What's going on?" "I'm just trying to do the right thing," I replied. "I found some valuable watches in the shed, and I'm handling everything according to the will." Sophia's tone grew even sharper. "So, you're hiding a windfall and trying to make it look like charity?" "I'm not stupid, Emma." "I'm not hiding anything," I said, trying to stay calm. "I'm just handling this the best way I can. The watches are worth a lot, and I'm making sure everything is taken care of." Her anger was palpable. "You're just trying to undermine me." "I'm coming over to sort this out." I hung up the phone, my heart pounding. I knew Sophia's behavior was driven by her own greed and financial troubles. Her lavish lifestyle in New York City came with its own set of pressures, and I suspected she was desperate for money. The next day, I continued working on sorting out the inheritance. Tom and I decided to focus on our future and prepare for the arrival of our baby. Despite the ongoing tension with Sophia, we tried to stay positive. I felt a sense of accomplishment knowing that I was doing my best to handle things fairly and responsibly. I was managing everything responsibly, even if it meant facing Sophia's anger. Little did I know, her desperation was about to lead her down a dangerous path. The days following our last conversation were tense. Sophia's frustration was palpable. Despite my attempts to reassure her, her mood only darkened. Her phone calls became more frequent and accusatory, filled with demands for explanations and thinly veiled threats. One evening, just as Tom and I were finishing dinner, the phone rang. It was Sophia again. I answered with a sigh, trying to sound as calm as possible. "Emma, I'm coming over," she said without preamble. "I need to see this safe and find out what you're hiding." "Sophia, this isn't necessary," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Everything is being handled according to the will. We're just following the legal process." "I don't care," she snapped. "I'm coming over to see it for myself." The call ended abruptly, and a knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. Tom looked at me, his concern evident. "What's going on?" he asked. "Sophia's coming over," I said, feeling the weight of the impending confrontation. "She's convinced I'm hiding something from her," I said. Tom nodded, his face grim. "We need to be careful. Her desperation might lead her to do something rash." That night, I barely slept. I kept imagining what Sophia might do. Her life in New York had been luxurious, but it came with its own set of problems. The pressure to maintain her high status had left her in a precarious financial situation, and I feared she might be driven to take drastic measures. The next morning, as I was preparing breakfast, I heard a commotion outside. Peering out the window, I saw Sophia's car parked in our driveway. My heart sank. She had arrived unannounced and was agitated. "Emma, open the door," Sophia shouted from outside, her voice a mix of frustration and desperation. I hesitated for a moment, but then went to the door and opened it. Sophia pushed past me without waiting for an invitation. Her face was flushed, and her eyes were filled with a mix of anger and fear. "Where's the safe?" she demanded. "I want to see it now." "Sophia, this is not how we should handle this," I said, trying to remain calm. "We need to resolve this without escalating things." She ignored me and headed towards the shed. I followed her, feeling a wave of dread wash over me. Tom stayed behind, trying to stay out of the confrontation. In the shed, Sophia's eyes darted around until she spotted the safe. She moved towards it with purpose, her hands shaking. "I knew you were hiding something," she said. "I want to see it now." "Sophia, stop," I said, reaching out to stop her. "This isn't going to help. You're just making things worse." But Sophia was beyond reason. She fumbled with the safe's handle, her frustration growing. In her panic, she knocked over a stack of old farming tools. The noise was loud and echoed through the shed. Suddenly, I heard a faint voice calling from the house. It was our mother, calling to see what was happening. I turned to look, but when I turned back, Sophia was frantically trying to open the safe. Just then, I heard a loud crash followed by a cry of pain. Sophia had toppled over the safe, and it had landed on her leg. She cried out in agony as she tried to move. I rushed to her side, but it was clear she was hurt badly. "Mom, call the police," I shouted, trying to stay calm. "Sophia's injured." Our mother, having heard the commotion, appeared in the doorway of the shed. Her face was pale as she hurried back to the house to call for help. I knelt beside Sophia, trying to comfort her despite my fear. The police arrived quickly, followed by an ambulance. The paramedics worked efficiently to get Sophia safely onto a stretcher. I watched helplessly as they loaded Sophia into the ambulance and drove away. Tom and I were left alone, the reality of the situation sinking in. Sophia's reckless actions had led to her injury and police involvement. We were both shaken, but we knew we had to deal with the aftermath. Later that evening, as we cleaned up the shed, our mother came to sit with us. Her face was lined with worry and fatigue. "I'm so sorry this happened," she said softly. "I didn't want things to end up like this." "It's not your fault, Mom," I said. "Sophia made her own choices. We just have to focus on moving forward and making sure everything is taken care of properly." Tom nodded in agreement. "We need to be prepared for what might come next. Sophia's actions might have serious consequences." As we sat together in the quiet of the evening, I reflected on the day's events. Sophia's desperation had led her to make a dangerous gamble, and it had cost her dearly. I hoped that, with time, she would come to understand the consequences of her actions and find a way to rebuild her life. But for now, Tom and I had to focus on our future and prepare for the arrival of our baby. The ordeal with Sophia had been a harsh reminder of how easily family bonds could be tested. As the days turned into weeks, the chaos of the past few months began to settle. Sophia's injury had been severe, and her stay in the hospital was extended due to complications. It was clear that her actions had not only hurt her physically, but had also deepened the rift between us. Tom and I settled into a routine of caring for our mother, preparing for the arrival of our baby, and managing the aftermath of the inheritance discovery. The shed was now neatly organized, and the safe's contents were safely stored in a secure location. We had taken care of the inheritance taxes and made sure everything was handled according to the law. One afternoon, as I was organizing baby clothes in the nursery, my phone rang. It was Sophia. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Emma," she said, her voice sounding weary. "I wanted to talk." I took a deep breath. "Okay, Sophia, what's on your mind?" "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened," she began. "I realize now that I let my greed and desperation get the better of me. I'm sorry for what I did." Her apology was unexpected. I could hear the exhaustion in her voice, and it was clear she had been through a lot. "Sophia, I appreciate your apology. It's been a difficult time for all of us. What's important now is how we move forward." "I know," she said. "Tom and I have been talking, and he's decided to file for divorce. He can't handle the stress and the lies anymore. I'm left with the consequences of my actions, and it's more than I can bear alone." I felt a pang of sympathy. Despite everything that had happened, I couldn't ignore the fact that Sophia was still my sister. "I'm sorry to hear that, Sophia. I hope you find a way to heal and rebuild your life." "Thank you," she replied. "I'm coming back to Kansas to see Mom and you. I want to make amends if you'll have me." When Sophia arrived a few days later, the atmosphere in the house was tense but hopeful. She had a visible limp and looked worn out, but there was a determination in her eyes. Our mother greeted her with a mixture of relief and caution. "I'm here to make things right," Sophia said as she entered the house. "I know I've caused a lot of pain, and I want to do whatever I can to make amends." I nodded, trying to keep my emotions in check. "We all need to work through this, Sophia. We've had a lot of changes in our lives, and we must support each other." The days that followed were filled with difficult conversations and healing. Sophia spent time with our mother, helping around the house and sharing stories of her time in New York. It was clear that she was genuinely trying to make up for her mistakes, though the process was slow and fraught with lingering tension. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, Sophia handed me a small package. "I wanted to give you something," she said. "It's a token of my apology and a symbol of my commitment to making things right." I opened the package to find a beautiful pocket watch, similar to the ones I had sold. It was intricately designed and had a note attached. The note read, "For Emma, with love and regret. May this remind you of the importance of family and the power of forgiveness." Tears welled up in my eyes as I looked at the watch. "Thank you, Sophia. This means a lot to me." Sophia smiled, a look of relief on her face. "I'm glad. I want us to heal and move forward. I know it will take time, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes." As the weeks went by, things slowly began to return to a new normal. Sophia's presence brought a renewed sense of hope and reconciliation. Tom and I continued to prepare for our baby's arrival and found comfort in the support of our family. The final turning point came when Sophia and I sat together in the garden, watching the sunset over the fields. It was a moment of quiet reflection and mutual understanding. "I wish Dad could have seen us together like this," Sophia said softly. "I think he would be proud of how we're working through everything." "I think so too," I replied. "It's been a tough journey, but we're finding our way, and that's what matters." With the birth of our baby, life took on a new dimension. The challenges we faced brought us closer together, and the lessons learned from the inheritance dispute strengthened our bonds. As we welcomed our child into the world, we did so with a renewed sense of family and hope for the future. The story of our father's legacy had ended in unexpected ways, but it had also opened doors to healing and reconciliation. Despite the pain and struggle, we emerged stronger, more understanding, and ready to embrace the new beginnings that awaited us.